kratom and where we need to go with it is state of Georgia. And so everybody knows a little about me. I've worked on this kratom issue for quite a few years, and we want what's best for Georgia, period. We want what's best for the safety of Georgians, period. And so we're going to keep an open mind throughout the process. We'll have public participation later. May not be today, but it will be at another meeting for sure to get input from everybody in the public. We'll make sure we get a notice about that if we run out of time today. But today is a tight schedule. I just want everybody to understand that. I'm going to let the committee introduce themselves, and then we'll get started. Like I said, one of the goals today was let's get the first meeting done. A lot of people's going to be here anyway. Let's find out some general stuff about kratom and go from there. But I'm excited being here. Like I said, I represent St. Simons, Brunswick, great community, and I was drawn into it because of that. We had a couple kids down there that were affected with the substance, and set to figure out which way to go with it now. So anyway, I'm gonna start down there with Chairman Meeks. If you can, we'll go from there across and back over, and everybody introduce themselves, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Stephen Meeks. I represent House District 178, which includes Apple and Wayne, Bacon, and Pierce counties. I'm a tobacco farmer, cotton grower, corn and peanuts down in Wayne County. Thank you for the opportunity to be here, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Mathis.
Thank you. I'm Danny Mathis. I represent District 133, which is Middle Georgia, Wilkinson, Twiggs, Bleckley, Dodge, and half Telfair. I appreciate being on this committee. Hope we can come to some resolutions on some things. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman Smith.
Well, good morning. Good to see everybody out so bright and early on a Wednesday after a late night for some last night. I'm Tyler Paul Smith. I represent House District 18, encompassing all Haralson, parts of Carroll, and Paulding counties.
Thank you. Representative Ridley.
I'm Jordan Ridley. I represent Southwest Cherokee and North Central Cobb, the Lake Allatoona area. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Al, Dr. Al.
Thank you so much. I'm Representative Michelle Au. I represent House District 50, which is in the North Atlanta Metro, Johns Creek, and a little bit of Alpharetta. And my day job when I'm not here is I'm a practicing anesthesiologist, and I have a master's degree in public health.
Thank you. And Chairman Corbett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John Corbett, District 174, which is Lowndes, Eccles, Clinch, Ware, Charlton, and Brantley counties, right on the Florida line. Excited to be on this committee. Look forward to working with the members. Let's come up with some common sense solutions to hopefully solve the problem that we're seeing with addiction to kratom. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, appreciate this. Appreciate everybody being here. We're going to get straight to the agenda. Like I said, tight timelines. We're going to move on. Dr. Steck. Dr. Steck comes from Emory University, and I'll let you tell you a little about yourself, and we'll let you get started. And she's got a presentation, and it's really appreciate you being here, and thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. Again, my name is Dr. Elena Steck. I'm one of the faculty at Emory University. I am trained in emergency medicine, medical toxicology, and addiction medicine, board certified in all three specialties. I also founded and run the addiction services at Grady Memorial Hospital. So this is something that we've been seeing for quite some time. And as Chairman Townsend said, my role here this morning is just to kind of set a common language and make sure that we are all kind of talking about the same thing. I have no conflicts of interest or disclosures. And so on a very high level, kratom itself is a plant. It comes from East Asia and has been used by indigenous cultures for millennia. It now, when we're seeing it in the United States, tends to come in a variety of formulations. Early 2000s, 2010s, it came predominantly as powders, which was then packed into capsules. stewed into teas. As you can see here, it's something that's usually sold kind of in bulk and then prepared however the individual finds it most easy to take. We're also now seeing concentrated extracts, which come sometimes in these little like shot bottles, like a 5-hour energy sort of thing, as you can see there in the image to the left. And many of these are images that I took myself just wandering around different shops in the area. It's very accessible and really quite. So I think one of the really important things to discuss when we're talking about kratom and kratom products are the reasons that people use it. And this is data back from 2020, but there was some recent data presented at this year's American Society of Addiction Medicine meeting, which confirms these data. Most of the time, people are using this for treatment of pain. And these are not mutually exclusive categories. So you'll notice that the percentages add up to more than 100. But treatment of pain and then treated of mood or psychiatric symptoms. So particularly for individuals who lack access to care, this is something that those communities have seen as a real boon. Another thing, and really kind of where we see it in the medical field most often, are for people who are using kratom as an alternative to prescription or illicit opioids, either as a replacement or as an alternative method to wean themselves off of prescription or more dangerous opioids like fentanyl. There are many compounds in kratom leaf in the actual plant itself, but the three that are most relevant to our discussion today are metragenine, 7-hydroxymetragenine, and metragenine pseudoindoxyl. So metragenine is the primary active compound in the plant itself, in either fresh or dried leaf. And 7-hydroxymetragenine, which is colloquially known most commonly as 7-OH or 7-hydroxy, metragenine, which is either pseudo or pseudoindoxyl, are really only present in trace amounts in the plant. Both 7-OH and pseudoindoxyl are metabolites that the body produces. So when someone ingests kratom leaf, again, in whatever preparation they choose to ingest it, the liver will convert the metragenine to 7-OH and then converts that 7-OH into pseudoindoxyl. Now, the body does this in low enough concentrations that we really don't think that 7-OH and pseudoindoxyl are responsible for the effects that people are experiencing when they take whole kratom leaf. And I think this is an important point to make when we start talking about the different synthetic products that are now available. Because metragenine, while it is an agonist at the mu opioid receptor, which is the same mechanism of action as the other opioid analgesics, is a fairly weak agonist at this receptor. So it doesn't produce the same amount of respiratory depression. It does not carry the same risk of overdose as things like oxycodone, heroin, and fentanyl. 7-OH and pseudoindoxyl, however, are more potent agonists at that mu opioid receptor, which means they are stronger than, for instance, morphine. 7-hydroxy, for instance, when you look at receptor binding studies, seems to be about 10 times as potent as morphine. Now, again, I want to point out that data comes from test tube studies. We still don't have a really great sense of how potent this stuff is in humans because those studies just have not been completed yet. Many of them are underway, but you'll hear a lot of folks saying that 7-hydroxy and pseudoindoxyl are so strong. And that's true in a molecular sense, but we're still figuring out a lot of the landscape in humans. The effects vary based on dose. So if someone takes whole kratom leaf powder and steeps it in a tea or has a very small dose and gets somewhere on the order of 5 to 10 milligrams of the active ingredient, it tends to have some mild stimulatory effects, which people describe as being akin to having a strong cup of coffee or a couple shots of espresso. It's not until people get into higher doses where you start to get into 40, 50, 100 milligrams of the active component, either in powder or capsule form, that you start to feel the opioid effects. So our folks who are using this for pain or folks who are using this as an alternative detoxification regimen for other opioids are going to be using somewhere between 1 and 5 grams of powdered kratom leaf per day, depending on how much opioid effect they need to either control their pain, mitigate their withdrawal symptoms, or help with their mood. One of the main concerns is that because this does act at the opioid receptors, the body gets used to it, just the same way that the body gets used to other opioids. So over time, people may find that either they need increasing doses of kratom to achieve the same effect, or that if they stop the kratom abruptly, they develop a withdrawal symptom that is exactly the same as what we see with opioid withdrawal. So people can get very sick, they don't have access to this substance anymore. As I mentioned, a lot of people are using kind of the leaf product, somewhere on the order of 1 to 5 grams a day, which comes out to about 50 to 150 milligrams of the active ingredient. It tends to be a younger population on the whole. Obviously, there's a wide range of individuals who use this, but in a recent study from, I want to say 2025, what they found was that the average user was in their early 30s and predominantly a male population. One of the concerning things to me as someone who works with folks who have substance use disorders, current substance use, about a third of people are using kratom with other substances, particularly if folks are taking kratom with alcohol or benzodiazepines, things that are sedating, that does increase the risk of respiratory depression and overdose from those combined effects. Kratom, as we're probably all well aware, has been increasing in use. So this is data from the National Poison Data System. It's an aggregate collection of calls that come into the poison centers across the country. And what we see when we compare it to other available kind of so-called gas station agents, things that you can buy in smoke shops or gas stations or in stores, it's like tianeptine or phenibut, kratom has definitely been increasing beyond what we see in trends for those other similarly accessible substances. Now, this data on the previous slide only went to 2023. There was a more recent study, again, looking at national data, which showed that, unfortunately, this got cut off. But between 2023, when that last graph ended, and 2025, when this study concluded, there was, again, a doubling of the number of annual calls that are coming into the Poison Center. Dr. Filkins, who's going to speak after me, will talk a little bit more about the details of what's happening at our Poison Center in Georgia and the number and types of calls that we're getting. But these calls tend to be are asking us as toxicologists. Providers are calling and saying, what do we do to help this person who's in kratom withdrawal? So many of these calls are withdrawals. Some of them now are overdoses, particularly as we're starting to see the synthetic products more and more frequently. And so that brings us to some of these synthetic products. Now, again, if you go into a shop and you buy kratom leaf, again, that's the package on the right, you see that the mitragynine content is low. I mentioned that folks, to get those opioid-like effects, need somewhere between 50 and 150 milligrams. A single serving of this powdered leaf is about 20% of that lower threshold. So it really kind of depends on how much people are taking. But we can also now get these concentrated kratom extracts, where instead of a single serving being only about 10 milligrams of mitragynine, a single serving in this extract on the left is 100 milligrams. This, from a product safety standpoint, is concerning to me as a toxicologist, because these are not universally child-resistant products. And so a child getting into this dose of mitragynine can and have resulted in overdoses where children end up admitted to the hospital in the intensive care unit. Kratom-derived products focus primarily on two metabolites that I talked about earlier, the 7-OH and pseudoindoxil. And again, these are much more potent than the mitragynine itself. So the lower doses just indicate that you need less to achieve the same effect. Again, if you look at this little package, which is very, again, from a child safety standpoint, very colorful. These tablets are very small. They're very easily ingested. So my primary concern is children getting access to these. So, drug storage, drug safety, this is not child-resistant packaging. And a child getting into this much 7-OH could definitely end up in an overdose and a hospital admission. Similarly, when you start getting into some of the newer marketing, you can also buy 7-OH products as these kind of pastry or candy-like formulations. Each of these cones contains 50 milligrams of 7-OH. And this here, again, this is really a marketing thing. This is marketed as a kratom gummy, but it really is just 7-OH. So the packaging on this is not always consistent, not always well regulated. And again, you can open that and a kid just thinks those are gummies and eat them all. The pseudoindoxil has a problem. Again, packaging really easily accessible, consistent. Kratom is regulated differently in different states. Some places have just local jurisdictions that ban or restrict the sale of these products. Some of them schedule kratom, 7-OH, and pseudoindoxil as Schedule 1, so they're completely banned. And others have some different levels of regulation. For instance, you have to be 18 in order to purchase these products, or you can buy kratom leaf, but can't buy 7-OH, synthesized 7-OH or pseudoindoxil. So there's a lot of variability on a state-to-state level. So that's all I have for the moment. I don't know if there are time for questions, Chairman, or if we.
Yeah, we have time for a few questions. Can you share the information to you? There's a slide for that, I believe, or a handout you gave.
I may have sent it as a PDF for the packet.
Yeah,
but-
it was this
Yeah.
one right here. Sorry. Can you, yeah.
Okay.
So one of the concerns that first led to the committee 4 years ago when we first brought the bill, the law was, but driving home from session and a gas station to get a Diet Coke and a candy bar or something like that to hit I-16 because I have to have a wake-up call on I-16 sometimes. It gets kind of long and boring. My wife to call me, probably you guys do too. But anyway, before I got on I-16, there near the Chick-fil-A on Arkwright, and they were selling Kratom cupcakes right there beside the Reese's and Skittles. Now that's been alleviated since now we have it behind the counter or in a locked case, but the packaging, I can see what you're saying, that is concerning.
And
So-
really, my concern is, the colorful marketing that's appealing to children, but just a safety thing. And this is true for any medication, not just for kratom. Any medication, folks generally do not keep their meds out of sight, out of reach, or locked up. And so for children to get into this, children are very fast. They're very sneaky. And if you drop something, they pick it up and they put it in their mouth faster than you can blink. So it's not always, and certainly not often, people being negligent, have on the kitchen table for their children to. It's just one of these things that happens. And unfortunately, as these products become more prevalent and more folks take them, it does increase the risk that children will be exposed. So again, I think product labeling, product safety, and product storage are really important things that we need to educate our consumers about.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Questions, committee? Dr. Al?
Thank you. Searching here. A couple quick questions, and I think you were starting to lead to this. You're talking about labeling and dosing and those types of things. Thanks for showing that. It's really helpful. Like, how this is marketed. Is labeling for dosage milligrams standardized across formulations?
That is a great question. It's not. It's incredibly not intuitive whatsoever. So one of the images I showed of the 7OH Opia product, had the 4 tablets, and on the front it said 80 milligrams. And if you just looked at that quickly, you might think, oh, there's 80 milligrams in this. I should take 1 tablet at a time. But in reality, if you read the very fine print, the dose is half a tablet. And so the tablets are not scored.
Mhm.
They're very crumbly, and so it's difficult to dose. Similarly, if you look at the package of the leaf, the dose there was 1/4 of a teaspoon. And that's a very small amount. It's difficult to measure. And the doses in some products, if you look at pseudoindoxyl products, they become even less intuitive. Or dosing 1/4 of a tablet. Anyone's tried to ever break a tablet into half, let alone quarters, that's going to lead to some very inconsistent dosing.
Right, and just to follow up on that, in terms of how a dose is presented, it obviously gives an indication for someone who isn't reading the fine print of how it should be taken. So, I think it's pretty reasonable for someone who picks up a pill or a tab to assume that 1 tab is 1 dose and not assume you have to break it into 4 pieces, which, as we know, is basically impossible. For the drinkable formulations, the shot,
The 15 milliliters,
Yeah.
Which is about half an ounce, is considered the standard dose. So
Okay.
the whole shot, but the amount of metragenine, if you're buying a kratom concentrate, is going to vary between products. So it's not a standard 100 milligrams per 15 mLs. Similarly, once you get into the liquid formulations of synthetic 7OH and pseudoindoxyl, those are equally variable in how much of each product they put in.
okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Representative Mathis?
This morning, when I did my introduction, I didn't say I was actually in, and I'm also was a coroner office for over 30 years, also a licensed EMT. So I've seen a lot of different kind of overdoses and those type things. Well, that's not the real question I want to ask. One thing that disturbed me, if you said that the test it has not been completed on the hazards of kratom, did I understand you?
A lot of studies currently ongoing trying to characterize clinical effects in general, both benefits and hazards from kratom use. We know on a very general level that it alleviates pain, that it alleviates withdrawal symptoms, that some people find it helpful for mood. We also find on a very general level that it can be something that turns into a substance use disorder where people need kratom to function in their everyday life and can't stop using it. It becomes a compulsive thing, and that people can withdraw from it. So we know kind of those broad, high-level clinical effects. What we don't necessarily know very clearly are the exact biochemical steps that are leading to that. There's still a lot of active research at that kind of cellular level.
She had people in a lot of ways. Is that correct?
We do know some of it. For instance, we know that the active ingredients act at the opioid receptors. There are also some other neurotransmitter systems that they act on. Those are still very murky because the experiments show that metragenine and 7OH will act one way in mice and a different way in dogs, and we don't have this worked out yet.
Let me skip me a little bit because this is so available to any age person, and there's no limit on how young you have to be to get this. We know a lot about it. We do know it has side effects. That's just concerning to me, but I do appreciate your knowledge, and I appreciate you being here today. Thank you.
Thanks, Representative Mathis. Now, there is a current law that on the books that you have to be 21 and you should have that in your packet. If you don't, we'll send it to you. And if people in the audience need a copy, just let us know. We'll make sure. I can tell you how to get it. It's online. It's not hard at all. We do have some restrictions, but thank you. And then I think 2 more questions. Let's go to Chairman Corbett.
Thank you, Dr. Speck, for being here this morning, and That's very, very concerning when you said that it's 10 times more potent than morphine. Is that correct?
What the initial data suggest. And again, that's test tube data. We're the prior question, we're still not 100% sure how potent it is in humans and how it compares to the other opioids that we know. Still in process.
And I guess several states have passed legislation. I mean, all the way from some ban it completely, some put guardrails on it as far as the age, the packaging, where it's located, who can buy it, where it's located. Is it a certain state that is doing something that you would recommend us, emulating?
That is a great question. And to be honest, I haven't looked at the opinion on that. But I do think some sort of regulation is appropriate. I think trying to ban substances completely leads to its own problems. We know that there are some beneficial, and from my experience as a medicine provider, there's one who's very focused on harm reduction. And I've had to choose between someone having uncontrolled use of fentanyl versus uncontrolled use of so I think having some restrictions, some regulations are very beneficial. And
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Chairman Corbett, and now Chairman Meeks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here today. And just to follow up on the question of the answer to the question you just answered, should there be thought given to where it is purchased, whether it be under the supervision of a pharmacist, convenience store, or other shops that may not have anyone in that shop that can give any medical advice as to the patients, and making sure that given what it's being used to treat.
I do think that it should be perhaps not as freely available as it is right now. However, it's not regulated by the FDA. It is not considered a pharmaceutical product. It's considered an herbal supplement. And so I think it would be difficult to restrict it to healthcare settings. I also think it would be difficult to restrict it to healthcare settings because there are a good number of physicians who don't know very much about it. So even putting it, for instance, in the hands of pharmacists or physicians or health practitioners who may not necessarily be most informed advice about it. It's very tricky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, thank you. Appreciate your testimony. And Dr. Patrick Wilkins from Georgia Poison Control in Grady. And by the way, we did ask for air conditioning earlier before the meeting started and checked the air yesterday. And so I think if you can touch base with Debbie, see if they'll GBA for me. We'll keep trying, guys. Yes, and I think we're not in session, so we can take our coats off if we need to. All right. Thank you for being here, and just again, thank you.
All right, thanks, Mr. Chairman. My name is Patrick Filkins. I'm a pharmacist by trade with additional training in emergency medicine, and I actually trained under Dr. Steck in toxicology, and I have stayed on with Grady and I testified to this committee. So comments on the brief side. The main thing I wanted to speak about today is what we're actually seeing in Georgia. There are a lot of studies that have been published, but here at the Georgia Poison Center, we serve Georgia, single county of the state. We are inevitably the ones being called by patients who need help after as Dr. Steck alluded to for withdrawal from cessation of Dr. did a good job. All of these are really unregulated. You know, market study was and went to different stores and tested all the products as to what they actually contained. And despite being marketed as Kratom, up to 8 of them were actually just purified 7-hydroxymetragine products, which despite saying it contained 50 milligrams or 100 milligrams. Additionally,
Apologize. Worst luck ever, and I'm like right next to my router. But I'm trying to get it.
Um, 13 year to date, well above the 400% increase. And in the same study in which they did secret shopper purchasing, 91 things that would be marketable to children, things that children would go after if found in the home. So, our current law has pretty good regulations that have been enacted to try to decrease the unsafe exposures to the population. But a recent study was published regarding states with these sort of restrictions, compared to states with full ban. And states with these consumer protection laws had over 4 times the rate of severe medical outcomes that I alluded to earlier that we're seeing in Georgia. And they also have kratom detection and fatal overdoses 4 times greater than states with full ban. Although full ban is not going to completely eliminate the availability of kratom, but having murky regulations compared to full ban, at least with the data that we have now, potentially would indicate that full ban may be safer from a public health perspective. But I'll conclude my comments now and answer any Georgia specific questions that you have, or any toxicology related question.
Okay, we've got a few questions. I just want to say thank you for being here again and testifying. And I'm going as what I can see in order, and number 16 was first. So Representative Kendrick.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your testimony. I just want to be clear about the studies and the fatalities that you mentioned. Are you talking about the pure leaf kratom, a combination of both of them? Because I know we've had a lot of conversation about the differences between pure leaf kratom and then derivatives of it. So I want to be very clear.
Of course. So one of the inherent kind of vulnerabilities, if you will, with the data, the coding system that we use to code all of these exposures, it can't keep up with the amount of products that are available on the market. So I can track a specific brand of an acetaminophen tablet. I can track a specific brand, of a blood pressure medication, just because of the regulatory nature and in the manufacturing and lack of standardization. It's coded generically as kratom. And we do have the availability now to see what our poison specialists are searching verbatim. So I can tell you if the name of the product indicates it's 7-hydroxy or pseudoindoxyl, but unfortunately, due to the marketing, most products are just saying it's kratom. So it's hard from our standpoint at the Poison Center, from a public health perspective, to really tease out the exact product and whether it 100% was pure 7-hydroxy or if it was pure leaf. Because again, they could be marketing it as pure leaf, but really we have no idea exactly what that product was.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Chairman Meeks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to add on to that previous question, so can you tell us from the incidences that you know of whether those fatalities have been from the synthetic, I guess would be 7-OH version, or the natural leaf?
I would have to go back and read the specific charts. It's probably some information I could provide to you, at a later date. But at the end of the year, we have to report all fatalities to NPDS, and it's at that point where we try to obtain medical examiner reports and potentially hospital records to really dive in and see if it was either related or a definite cause. But again, that's something that happens at the end of the calendar year.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, and we'll follow up so we can get that info. Thank you. Okay, next will be Representative Mathis. Not Mathis, I apologize. Ridley over here. No.
My apologies.
Not a problem. I have 2 questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you talk about the fatalities, did they have any comorbidities, or was it strictly kratom overdose was the cause of death?
Yeah, again, I would have to go into the chart and see what was coded to see if they had any comorbidities underlying, if it was reported to us. So again, I could provide.
Because I think that's very important because, saying, well, they had kratom in their system and that caused the overdose when they had stage 4 cancer and they were trying to take the pain. It's not necessarily the kratom that killed them. It could have been the cancer. And then my second question, and the first lady started it, she said in her chart, she showed that it went up to 1,500 calls for a year for kratom. And then she said afterwards, the last 2 years, it jumped to 3,000 calls. How many total calls does the Poison Control Center get? And how do those numbers compare to things like alcohol, marijuana, fentanyl, or heroin?
So actually our most, I'll comment on the substances. Our most commonly called substances are analgesics. So, acetaminophen, ibuprofen, things like that. We really don't get called as frequently as you would think regarding marijuana or alcohol or even opioids. Unfortunately, we don't particularly get called on a lot. And I think a big part of that is because emergency medicine providers, obviously at this juncture in the opioid epidemic, are very well versed in managing those patients. They know to administer naloxone. So they typically don't need, elevated expert help from toxicologists at this point to manage those cases. So I couldn't give you an exact figure on how often we're getting called, but I will say I'm willing to bet there's a lot less than you would think. And I'm sorry, the first part.
The total number of calls, y'all.
Yes. So the total number of cases that we manage varies year to year. Last year we managed about 75,000 cases. We're typically either the third or fourth busiest poison center in the country.
Okay, so out of the 75,000, 3,000 or so were for kratom.
So that was, I believe Dr. Steck provided data nationally. So that
Also, it was 3,000 nationally.
correct.
I mean, do you know what the poison?
Our year to date is 161 cases.
So 161 out of 75,000.
Well, to date, it would be.
Okay, 35 or
yeah,
half that
yeah.
number. Yeah.
Sure.
So 161 out of 37.5.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Of course.
Okay, thank you. And Representative Al.
Thank you so much. I want to go back to that figure that you cited before, that there's been a 400% increase in pediatric exposures.
That was up to 2025.
So 2025, yeah. Obviously, the point of a study committee ultimately is to develop policy recommendations that we can work on as we come back into the next session and sessions beyond. Let's talk just for a second about the marketing and the flavors that you cited as being contributive to pediatric exposures, in particular because of appealing to young children. I think we could probably all agree, regardless of our stance on this, that children should not be taking the substance that is illegal for people under 21 to get in this state. Can you talk a little bit about your perspective on something we've talked about with respect to, for example, vaping, where we restrict the type of marketing and the types of flavors and presentations that can appeal to a younger population, for example, fruit and candy flavors, how it is marketed, to whom these ads are shown. With the vaping, something that we've talked about a little bit more, how it's presented commercially is oftentimes vapes are presented as a safer alternative for cessation. Sounds a little bit familiar in the setting, right? For smoking cessation, but I think it's maybe a little bit more of a dubious claim when you're trying to talk about smoking cessation for an older population, but you're selling cotton candy flavored vapes. Do you think there's a role for that type of flavor restriction or marketing restriction in kratom sales?
Certainly, I think in addition to minimizing the appeal to, and I won't even say pediatric population. When I say pediatric, that is patients 6 years and under. So obviously, a 6-year-old is not going into the gas station and purchasing these products, right? It's more so if it's laying around in the home, they think it's a gummy worm or what have you. So in that regard, I think there's no reason to have marketing such as that. You don't have to appeal to the adult population. I think a lot of people who are using this product know what they're using it for, and there's no reason for it to be more accessible or more appealing to children. Additionally, there should certainly be packaging restrictions. I think a big a big poison prevention initiative historically has been child resistant packaging, and specifically, if they're capsules being in a bottle that children under the age of 6 can't open within 15 minutes, something such as that. So I think that's another potential initiative that could be undertaken, is preventing the sheer amount that these children can be exposed to. And, that is historically done with all, over-the-counter medications through child-resistant packaging.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's it.
All right.
Appreciate you being here. We'll touch base again. Appreciate your involvement and work with Georgia Poison Control. Next will be Jeff Breedlove, CEO of American Addiction Recovery. Also, I want to give a special shout out to Dr. Sam Parks Brown from, I believe, our regional director, FDA. Yes, thank you for being here. And welcome to everybody else, like I said earlier. Mr. Breedlove.
This, shotgun.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If it please the committee, I'm Jeff Breedlove, and I am the CEO of the Georgia-based American Addiction Recovery Association. More importantly than that, I'm a person in long-term recovery from addiction. I was in active addiction for 30 years, and I'm blessed to have been in recovery for 9 years. Of course, during that time in recovery, I worked here at the Georgia State. Don't hold it against me, but it was the Senate. Sorry. Apologize. But I was a policy analyst for you. I worked for Governor Deal. I worked for Georgia members of Congress. And, I was in active addiction. And I'm blessed to be standing before you as a survivor. You honor families and survivors by talking about this policy issue. So first and foremost, let me make sure on behalf of everybody impacted by this that I say thank you for taking time out of your schedules to talk about this policy issue. Addiction itself, opioids and fentanyl, are the #1 cause of death for Americans 18 to 45. And the #1 industry impacted is construction, and the #2 is agriculture, and the #3 is hospitality and entertainment. And those are all things important to our job base in Georgia. So people in my space, this is a complex issue. And I was back there praying about what I was going to start out with. And I got to say, Mr. Filkins, what a great presentation. And I think the thing that should scare all of us to death is the secret shopper phenomenon. And he's not the first leader in this state. Others have shared at conferences about the secret shopper and the testing at places like UGA. It's never what's on the package. So I thought I was going to say profoundly that there were 2 kinds of people you're going to hear from in this process. But I realized listening that I was wrong. There's 3. There's 3 types of people you're going to hear from as you do your important work. One group of people are going to be people that stand before you and they're here for public health and public safety. And they don't stand to profit personally from anything they testify about. Then you're going to hear from some people, some of my brothers and sisters, some wearing these shirts, some dear friends, that really believe Kratom helps them. And it probably does. And I wouldn't begin to argue with them, because they probably got one of those packages that actually was healthy. And it probably does help them. And I hope they get to testify and we hope we hear their voice. But you're going to hear from some people who believe that greed is good. And they're here to exploit my brothers and sisters in active addiction. They can say whatever they want to say to you over these next weeks and months. But this is the number right here. 233. And it's a number for you to consider. And each of you will react to this number differently. But that's the number that the CDC says has died nationally from Kratom. Maybe that number's okay with you. It's clearly okay with some people. Not okay with me. You see, I'm going to speak for people who can't speak today or won't speak today, because the number one danger around addiction that most of us believe in our community isn't any substance we put in our bodies. It's the stigma around the disease. And some people will not come and stand behind a podium like I will, because they're afraid they'll lose their job. They're afraid their church will ask them to leave the congregation. They're afraid they'll be made fun of at a school. So I want to say this. Medically assisted treatment is important. There are multiple pathways to recovery. And we should support legitimate, scientifically based products that help one of my brothers and sisters who are still in active addiction find long-term recovery. Our brother and sister in recovery sustain recovery. I'll be the first one at a podium to say, make that product legal, affordable, free if necessary. This ain't that. This ain't that. Representative Kim Schofield, she held up a picture at a prior study committee meeting, or maybe it was a committee meeting, of Funyuns sold in her district. And by the way, I don't live in her district, but I live very close to it. I live right here in downtown Atlanta. Funyuns. You know who that was aimed at? It was aimed at our kids. It was aimed at our busy parents who run into the convenience store, grab the product, throw it at their kid in the back seat on the way home from their second job. And by the way, 233, because that's deaths. What about the medical conditions of people that survive? Let's talk about that too. So if we come up with a product that one of my brothers and sisters can get that's safe, let's do it. But you do not get those at convenience stores. I went to a convenience store yesterday on purpose. Quick Trip. Yes, they have little Pepto-Bismol things and little Tylenol things and little things that you can get if you're traveling and want some relief. You do not go to a convenience store, I submit to you, to save your life, to find a product that's going to keep you in recovery from addiction. You don't. It's about integrity. If the men and women pushing this product and asking the state to allow them the privilege to compete in the free market with their product really cared about people, they would be tripping over themselves to make sure the product was full of integrity, and they had medical associations endorsing them left, right, and center. But they don't. They put it in convenience stores. Now, I'm just a guy in recovery. And I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night, so I hope you take this for what it's worth. But I do know the FDA, and I do know that under Biden and Trump, the FDA, in a bipartisan manner, continues to warn the public against the use of kratom for medical treatment until safety and effectiveness can be evaluated. In fact, I know the FDA has a website that literally says, the time to act is now. We can and must prevent the next wave of the opioid crisis. Bipartisanly, FDA, Biden and Trump administrations. I know the Mayo Clinic. I've been to the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. It's a pretty reputable place. The Mayo Clinic states that kratom has not been shown to be safe or to treat any medical condition. And the FDA has warned people not to use kratom because of possible harm. The American Psychiatric Association, not a hotbed of conservatism, a bipartisan group of professionals. They consider kratom to be opioid-like components having the potential for dependency and addiction. Our Attorney General, Chris Carr, on November 13th, 2025, issued a formal warning to Georgia about this very topic, that it was dangerous for Georgia. And I want to say to the first testifier, when she commented that Well, compared to fentanyl, this is safe. I got news for you. Compared to fentanyl, that nuclear material in the ground in Iran, that's safe too. Fentanyl is a weapon of mass destruction, and a little bitty grain on the top of a pencil can kill you dead. So of course it's safer than fentanyl. But it's not safe. It's not. Not today. Not with the packaging. Not being honest. So look, clinic says more than 3,400 kratom use poison reports from 2014 to 19. The 233 deaths, according to the CDC. 7% of the overdose deaths in Georgia involve kratom. And I saw this morning in this room. The GBI autopsy data, according to the state medical examiner, kratom contributed, according to the GBI, to at least 5 deaths in 2016 and 11 deaths in 2017. And DeKalb County, Georgia, the coroner reported that kratom chemicals appeared in autopsies 6 times in 2025. 6, 11, 5. Those are not big numbers to a committee, but they're big numbers to a family. They're big numbers to a community. Those are Georgia families. Those are Metro Atlanta families who probably won't come here. They went to a funeral over a product that we're letting be sold like the Wild Wild West. And somebody's making money off of my brothers and sisters. And it's got to stop. So my recommendation today is this. Let's get a Georgia solution where we can get this in the hands of reputable medical professionals. And let's get a product on the shelves that people know what they're buying, not aimed at kids, and it's there for medical purposes. Now, if people say, I don't want it for medical purposes, it's a herb and I just want it because I'm an American and I can do what I want, that's great with me. It's none of my business. But I would think we could all agree. We at least want to know what's in the packages. And we at least don't want packages aimed at kids. And if you pass any law, rule, or regulation, I implore you to have funding available for the appropriate state agency to enforce the law you pass. It does no good to pass a law without enforcement mechanisms behind it. And if you don't believe me, I will drive you to a convenience store in urban Atlanta, suburban Atlanta, and rural Georgia and show you what I've seen on the shelves. They're not going to take it off. Bad actors are not going to do that. So it's a serious issue. It's a life and death issue. And I did want to say this. We're going to hear people, I'm a prohibitionist. I'm intolerant. I don't care. No, I care about the people behind that 233 number. I care about the people who are so ashamed of what happened when they sought a relief. Let me be real for a minute, then I'll end, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Oh, I was in active addiction. I was running and gunning. I live in Grant Park. I was running and gunning on these streets that you can walk to from where we sit. I've been in places that you don't want to go to in your nightmares. I went there because of my addiction. It's a brain disease. I sought anything and everything because my brain wasn't functioning healthily. People in active addiction don't read government reports. They don't read labels on packages. You're right. It's pretty sure that they think it's one, the whole dosage is one pill, not you got to break it. We're not reading that when we're in active addiction. We're not reading that when we're in pain and early recovery, trying to feel better to make the pain go away. We trust the store it's sold at. We trust the state wouldn't let it be there. So I'm glad these folks are here today. And each of them are a blessing. And I thank God and my higher power Christ that they are alive. But they're blessed to be alive. They're not among the 233. And we've got to find that balance to give a safe product to people who deserve it, not have something on the shelves that's not. And I'll leave you with this. I will make a prediction as a former staff member. If you don't do what Alabama's done, what Florida's done, what Louisiana's done, what Arkansas's done, what Tennessee's done, if you don't join these other southern states, I mean, God forbid we talk about the West and the North. Let's forget those folks. They don't get it. Go Dogs. If we don't at least do what our brothers and sisters across the South are doing in their state general assemblies and protect our communities, you will be back here within 2 election cycles having a committee on how you disperse the Kratom settlement dollars, just like you're figuring out how to disperse the opioid settlement dollars today, because the deaths will increase, the lawsuits will happen, and you will have been part of making a choice at this moment in history. This is a moment in time for you. Are you on the side of history of those for public health who will not profit, who want safety for our communities and our families? Or are we on the side of, hey, let it ride. It's okay. It's free enterprise. Let people make their choice. Don't worry about the safety problems. Make your choice. Families are watching you, but you are making a life and death decision with the study committee. Mr. Chairman, I thank you for the privilege to testify.
Okay, thank you very much, Representative Ridley.
I just want to clarify a couple things. Your 233 deaths, according to the CDC's website, was from 2015 to 2025. But in that, it says 79% of them had another drug in their system, and 62% of those were fentanyl and heroin, which are already illegal. So that really only brings it down to 49 people over 10 years who died of kratom overdoses without another drug in their system. And the CDC said that there was a great chance they already metabolized another drug out of their system. They couldn't test for it, so they couldn't even say those 49 were kratom only. So over a 10-year period, we had 49 people die from kratom, but we had over 100 die from ibuprofen. So you're saying we're going to have settlements and everything. Nobody's going after the ibuprofen company for killing more people than kratom does at over a 100% higher rate. So again, you know, I'm all about supporting people in recovery. I know people who have had meth addictions, heroin addictions, and I'm all about supporting them and doing everything we can. But I think it's a little disingenuous to come in here and say, you know, it's so bad when ibuprofen's killing twice as many people. And then also you talked about people getting paid to come testify. Are you currently getting paid in your current role to testify here today for addiction recovery?
No, I'm here with my own organization.
Bet that organization pay you.
Well, sure.
So you are getting paid to be here today.
Well, I run the organization. I pay myself.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Representative. Chairman Corbett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Breedlove. Thank you for your passion. Thank you for your testimony. We talked about the 233 and y'all just debated trying to differentiate, you know, if it's all kratom or not. But my question, I guess, is I have a friend who's got a stepson that's addicted to this. They put him in recovery. He stops breathing from the kratom, and they put him in a recovery, trying to get him off of the kratom. Is there a number of, or do we know the number of people that's in recovery for kratom abuse?
I couldn't testify that I know the number of people in recovery. I can say that, you know, the number that the Mayo Clinic, they report 3,400 poisonings. Now, whether or not somebody's in recovery from that poisoning or not, so it's not a fatality.
Yeah, it doesn't show up on the 233,
Right.
but how many's in recovery?
Right. I
For
mean,
this, because I know this one personal story of a friend of mine, but also there's a pastor in my district that runs a men's recovery, and he said that's the biggest thing they're seeing there also.
right. No, it's a very dangerous product. I think it could be if and if you heard my testimony fully, if we can get a product that will help people sustain whatever they need medically in a healthy environment, I don't care what it's called, and we should use it. But what's out there right now, what's going on in our streets right now is not a healthy situation. There probably is a solution, and there's probably some way to have good actors with good products that serve good families. But we have too many bad actors in this space right now. And I will stand up to them and I will say that it is completely unacceptable for day after day after day for products to be on the shelves in Georgia that do not contain what's in there. And we may not know the exact numbers, but we all know families are being impacted by this product. It's not safe. It may be not as dangerous as fentanyl. It's not as safe as something governed by a medical doctor and approved by our medical authorities.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. And one thing, also, Mr. Breedlove, reason he's testifying today, he is an addiction recovery specialist and he sees many different cases. And so that's why he's here today. We all will be asking questions, who's taking money, whatever. And in some roles, they'll do that. You'll have a researcher later that's receives money from a Kratom organization, does valid and reliable research. And you'll see it same way of others who are doing post-certified training and they will benefit from that. But in this case here, he is testifying because he is an addiction recovery specialist. And he does a good job with that. And he's well respected in the recovery community. So appreciate testifying. Kendrick, representative, real quick, because we got to start pushing it.
Oh, well, I'll ask them offline.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Breedlove, thank you very much.
Chairman, thank you very much.
Okay, next up will be Dr. McCurdy, University of Florida. Appreciate you being here from Gator Country and let you introduce yourself. And rest of the speakers, we do have a full schedule, so we want you to kind of get to the point too where we can ask questions because our committee is asking questions, as you can tell. I appreciate that. And committee members, as you know, we're not taking a break. So if you do have to take a break, please go do that and come back. We understand that very much. Dr. McCurdy, thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee. I'll start by saying I'm a proud graduate of the University of Georgia. Go Dogs. And it was a hard day when I had to take that job at Florida. But
thank you.
But
that's on the record.
They pay the bills. So I don't know if my slides are able to be shown.
We had them loaded. We practiced yesterday, I promise.
I am well, as of yesterday, I was just promoted to University Distinguished Professor at the University of Florida. I served as the eminent Frank A. Duckworth Eminent Scholar Chair, Associate Dean for Faculty Development, and Director of our University of Florida Center for Translational Sciences Institute Translational Drug Development course. So my research is in basic science primarily, and moving drugs into the marketplace. We do drug discovery and drug development. I also previously served as the American Association of Pharmaceutical Scientists president in 2017 and 2018. I'll address the funding situation up front. We've received well over $100 million in federal taxpayer dollars for funding our research. We've received close to $1 million in private donations from Kratom companies, individuals that were supporting our work. Those donations have gone into the University of Florida Foundation and unrestricted access funds for me to control. The donors have no control over or say so of how those funds are utilized. So I want you to realize that there's no influence from those donors. I greatly appreciated, and they allow us to do more science than we can. So I want to go back a couple steps and talk about where this came from. This is traditional use in Southeast Asia. This is a tree, and this is leaves that are picked off of a tree in Malaysia and Thailand. In Malaysia, they make a decoction or a tea from the leaves, freshly picked, In Thailand, they actually chew the leaves, similar to like what we would hear about coca leaf chewers in South America. Now, the leaf material itself has been used for hundreds of years in Southeast Asia with no issues of harm or, problems, so to speak. Most of the material that comes into the United States actually gets imported from Indonesia, not from Malaysia and Thailand, but Indonesia is just a little further south. Same kind of environment, same things like that. The material itself, kratom, is illegal for sale in Malaysia, but you can see at the bottom right hand of that, at that picture there, that's a roadside stand out in rural Malaysia. You can buy this stuff very easily anywhere, and there's no real enforcement on the selling of it being prohibited. Thailand actually outlawed kratom in the 1940s because it was cutting into their opium tax revenue. A few years ago, they actually made it legal again in Thailand, and they have a thriving controlled business in Thailand. So these products are still being used over there. And I want to talk about what the difference is in the United States. And we've already heard a little bit of this, but the biggest difference is that we have things other than leaf. Okay, leaf is all that's used in Southeast Asia, although they're starting now to sell extracts there as well. But the way that I like to equate this is the way that we treat alcohol in this country. So alcohol, we all know, is divided into many categories. We have your light beers and your seltzers. We have your craft beers. We have your wine. We have your fortified wines. We have your spirits. And then we have things like Bacardi 151 and Everclear 190 proof, right? We don't call all these things just alcohol. We specify those categories. Unfortunately, with kratom, it is all considered the same thing. And all of those products fall into what I call sort of a garbage can description of kratom. And the differentiation of these products is really the problem. So leaf products have been the most studied, particularly in humans, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. And then, as we do in America, we supersize things, and you've heard already about the extracts and the concentrates, and unfortunately now these semi-synthetics, which aren't even any longer part of the plant. But I'll talk about that as well. We do think there's strong therapeutic potential. These are studies that are ongoing. We just had an investigational new drug application approved by the FDA to study mitragynine or mitragynine, the major alkaloid in the plant. That was after about 8 years of study with the National Institute on Drug Abuse and the National Center for Advancing Translational Sciences. In and all, that was about $80 million worth of taxpayer dollars that went into the development of this product. That product is going into human clinical trials very soon. I meet with National Institute on Drug Abuse officials next week to discuss that project. We do believe that it can be successfully used for opioid detoxification or as a medicated assisted therapy, very much like Suboxone or buprenorphine is used today. We also know that some polydrug users are reporting that kratom reduces the intake of methamphetamine. There are grants funded from the National Institutes of Health to look at harm reduction in alcohol use disorder, psychostimulant use disorder, as well as opioid use disorder. So there's a lot of medical potential that's seen here. The other thing is that the lack of standardized products, which is many of what we're talking about today, has really delayed rigorous clinical evaluation of these products. And so this is very busy. I do have a copy of these slides for everyone that wants them. They can be made available. This is many of the alkaloids that are present. And the only reason that I put this up here, and you can't read a thing on there, but these are all the different proteins in the human body that this interacts with. it does not interact only with opioid receptors. It interacts with opioid receptors. It interacts with serotonin receptors, which are mood elevation, where many of the antidepressant type actions of this plant come into being. It also interacts with adrenergic receptors. Adrenergic receptors are our fight or flight system that allow us to get energy. And those are the three main systems that this plant works on. All three of those systems are involved in pain transmission. And so we do not have a single drug approved in the United States that targets all three of those simultaneously. We do have some opioids that target the adrenergic system as well. But we don't have anything that is as unique as this is in terms of its potential properties. So I want to talk straight up to human trials, and the FDA has sponsored now 2 human clinical trials with Kratom leaf. The first, and we were a collaborative team involved in those studies. The first one was what they call a SAD study. It's a single ascending dose trial. That manuscript actually is published now, and that study investigated a single ascending dose. So they start with a low dose, 1 gram of leaf material. A month later, they move to the next dose because they do all the safety reviews, all the reviews of blood samples, everything that was experienced by that individual before they pass safety to go to the next dose. So they went from 1 gram to 3 grams. The FDA was shocked that nothing happened at 3 grams. So they skipped the next dose and went to 8 grams, then 10 grams, and then 12 grams. They completed the full ascending dose trial. The end result was that there was no clinically significant adverse events that occurred in that trial. Yes, at the higher doses, 8, 10, and 12 grams, there was some nausea and vomiting that occurred in certain individuals that also occurred in the placebo group in that study. Now, there was one finding from that study that made it appear to have some opioid-like effects, and that was that the pupil size changed. But it changed only a fraction of an amount compared to what someone would be seeing if you were taking something like morphine. The next study that's underway at Baylor College of Medicine is the human abuse potential trial. So the FDA didn't think they would even get to the human abuse potential trial because they didn't think that they were going to show safety in the single ascending dose trial, which they did. Now we're moving into the human abuse potential trial that will have 3 doses of kratom over multiple time of exposure, and it will go up to 16 grams of leaf material. I want to just point out, these are in 500 milligram encapsulated powder doses, so 500 milligrams per capsule. Somebody that's going to be taking 16 grams is going to be taking 32 capsules within a 5-minute period. If that doesn't cause you some nausea and vomiting thinking about it, I can understand why. We will see at that higher dose, though, if we have any other toxicological or serious safety concerns, as that dose has not been studied in humans. There have been a couple of other studies in Canada that have been carried out on kratom and kratom extract. The extract papers have not been published, but some of the leaf material has been published, pretty much aligning and agreeing with the study that the FDA conducted. Coming back to what I said earlier, I think this is the key underlying thing, that not all kratom is equal. We published this paper to talk about the distinction between native leaf and extract products. And interestingly enough, this came out in October of 2023. In that time frame, the semi-synthetics or synthetic compounds started to emerge in the marketplace as well. We were not aware of those at that point. So there's kind of 2 faces of kratom as we see it up to the synthetics. And we'll talk about that much more in detail here in a second.
Dr. McCurdy.
Yep.
Just to give you a heads up, we got the presentation late yesterday.
Yep.
We'll have to speed it up and let the committee ask questions.
No problem. We got this you heard about 7OH. It is a metabolite of michigan, the main product. Some of these are sold like Smurfs. They're all flavored tablets. You've heard all this before. I want to show you how exquisitely selective this is as an opioid. This is all the human drug targets, over 100 drug targets that have FDA approved drugs to them. You can see circled in red there. Those are the opioid receptors. That's 7-hydroxy. It's incredibly selective for opioid receptors. This is the binding affinity. I want to talk about abuse potential studies. We did all the abuse potential studies in our laboratory and published those that were required for preclinical abuse related studies as described in guidance by DHHS or FDA. And most of our data went into the press conference data package that was presented by the FDA in July of 2025, where they recommended scheduling of this substance to the DEA. Yes, there's human abuse potential with this 7OH. We've heard about it already alluded to. These are studies that you can read more detail. Does it cause respiratory depression? Yes. As an isolated semi-synthetic product, this causes respiratory depression. Interestingly enough, in that same study that we published, mitragynine, the major alkaloid in kratom, actually increases respiration. Also, we've seen cardiopulmonary arrest in a patient that was revived with naloxone following reported use of 7-hydroxy. And 7OH should not even be considered a kratom product. And I understand that secret shopper paper was us too. So many of these compounds are being sold under the guise of being kratom products or kratom alkaloids or enhanced kratom alkaloids, but they are 7OH or other synthetics. And we heard about pseudoindoxil, which actually doesn't exist in the plant at all. It is another fully synthetic compound. It is a metabolite in humans, but one of the latest fully synthetic compounds, which we're starting to see more and more post-mortem blood samples containing this substance, is called MGM-15. This is on the market in Florida like crazy right now. In fact, some of the death cases that we've seen in Florida are from this. That picture in the middle of this is how we received the product. We had to buy it with cryptocurrency. It came to us. This was when it first got introduced. That text that's really small on the left side was the packaging label that came with it. They said their product is so new, they have no labels yet. And it arrived in an empty jar like that, clear jar, cotton balls on top of it. That was it. So these are the things that are really scary to me and really concerning to me, because these synthetics are far from kratom. They are derived from kratom, but they are not kratom at all. So there's a lot of questions that remain, but regulation is key, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dr. McCurdy. Two things for you. I'll let Representative ask a question in just a second, Ridley. First is everybody's got a copy of your PowerPoint. We gave everybody a copy here. But second, too, as we go through this process, you're definitely more than welcome to contact Deborah, my office, or me, and we'll get you any stuff you want to send us or give us. Please, we'll forward it right away. So
Okay.
No worries about that.
Thank you.
And then Jordan Ridley, Representative.
During your presentation, you said there was a human abuse potential trial at Baylor with the FDA currently going on. Do you have a target date for when that's going to be over?
No.
Okay,
It's just getting started. In fact, we're just waiting for the final approval from the Institutional Review Board so that we can start recruiting subjects. So it's really just getting started.
Okay.
It'll be at least another year.
Okay, thank you. And Chairman Corbett?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. McCurdy, you talk about Florida and what they have done, what laws they have passed. Now, they have not banned kratom. What laws? Can you speak to that?
Correct. I've been involved in a lot of discussions with Senator Jay Collins, who's now Lieutenant Governor of Florida. He has put together quite a team to put regulation around this. A lot of that was developed alongside the American Kratom Association and the Global Kratom Coalition with inputs from them on regulation. He has Florida safety first for Floridians, just like you all have Georgia Safety First for all Georgians. The law that was put into place there is a Consumer Protection Act, very similar to what's already in place, I think, in Georgia, that limits age, certain packaging has to be there, et cetera. I'm not fully versed on the entirety of what that is because every session it seems to come back up for a little more refinement. But what Florida has done is put an emergency ban on these synthetic products.
Thank you. And I guess one final question for me is when I talked with Dr. Grummins, one of your colleagues, and we talked on the phone, he had permission to talk and emailed each other. And one of the questions I asked was about where to sell the product at. And he seemed to be more apt to where at least that person, let's say my neighbor, can go to the pharmacist or someplace if they don't see their doctor. Is it safe? Like Joe could be on blood pressure medicine, so he doesn't need to take that. In your eyes as a researcher, do you have an opinion yet? And you may not, of the way we have the law now. Is it fully safe like in a convenience store type situation, or is it better where they can ask a professional and not have a prescription, but just ask a professional, hey, these are my meds. Am I safe to take this product?
So I didn't mention my original training and licensure is as a pharmacist. So I actually wear that hat too. And I am fully supportive of much more information around these products when they're sold. And that should be done by someone who's educated to a point, at least. They don't necessarily have to be a medical professional. In my ideal world, you would put this into a dispensary just like you do cannabis. And that way the material is authenticated. We know the sources, that material has been tested, verified to be what it says to be on the label. But I think that's probably a heavy lift. Obviously, the biggest problem with the legitimacy of these products at all is where they're available. I mean, you can't go into Walmart and buy it. You can't buy it on Amazon, but you can certainly buy it at the convenience store. Many of the retailers or vendors, manufacturers have their own websites that you can buy it from. But again, those tend to have a lot more education because it's in a website. But to the point of the earlier speaker, a lot of people aren't reading all the information that's there either.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Okay. Next we have Robert Durkin. He's counsel to AKA. And time permitting too, we're going to try to Representative Reeves is here as well. And I've got to get him on the agenda between somebody. So we'll look at that as well, committee members. Okay. Mr. Durkin, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee. I am a thorn among roses. Even earlier today, Chair Townsend said I might have been a better fit for a different meeting in front of the committee. If that's the case, I'm more than happy to do that. But I'm a practicing attorney. My name is Bob Durkin. I'm outside counsel to the American Kratom Association. I represent numerous other clients that manufacture and distribute food, dietary supplements. Some of these folks distribute products that contain kratom. I'm also a pharmacist. I have a master's degree in molecular biology. I was a captain in the Army for 6 years, where I was residency trained and board certified in nuclear pharmacy at Walter Reed Army Medical Center. I worked at the Federal Food and Drug Administration for about 12 years. I started in the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, where I worked on pharmacy compounding, unapproved new drugs, over-the-counter drugs, fraudulent drugs. I worked I was on a crisis management team at the Food and Drug Administration, where my job was to lead a team of folks that when an FDA regulated product was hurting people, it was our job to get it off the market as quickly as possible to contain it. We did a lot of work with CDC and state authorities. I did food defense for a couple of years. That's where a small group of people make sure that our food supply isn't intentionally contaminated by a disgruntled employee or a state actor. And then I was fortunate enough to work for 6 years as the deputy director of FDA's Office of Dietary Supplement Programs. In this role, I was responsible for policy. I was responsible for operations. I supervised the people that did good manufacturing practices, reviews of inspections. I supervised folks that reviewed dietary supplement labels. And more importantly, the new dietary ingredient notification team. When a new dietary ingredient is brought to market, sometimes it has to file a notification with the FDA. It's not an approval process, it's just a notification process. And I led that team, I supervised the team that reviewed those, and I've probably signed about 100 or so, maybe 150 response letters to new dietary ingredient notifications on behalf of the Food and Drug Administration. I'm a former regulator. My role when I typically testify in front of committees like this is to provide context about regulation. You mentioned that there's someone else from FDA in the room. I welcome their input or to check me if I say something a little off. I'd love to meet them later. I heard some things earlier that I can provide some context around. I heard Kratom's not regulated. Kratom is regulated. If Kratom is sold as a food or a dietary supplement, it falls under the jurisdiction of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. It also falls under the jurisdiction of Georgia's food and drug statutes and regulations. Kratom is a botanical. One of the problems that I've heard today is that Kratom is a bucket. As Dr. McCurdy said, and even the first two folks that testified had said, Kratom seems to be, everything is Kratom. Leaf is Kratom. An extract from the leaf is Kratom. Unfortunately, the synthetics now are being called Kratom, 7-OH, 15-MG. Those are definitely not Kratom. Those are contaminants in Kratom. Those are things that legitimate Kratom distributors make sure aren't in their product. At this point in time, there are many of my clients that manufacture Kratom are registered as food facilities with the Federal Drug Administration, Food and Drug Administration. They're registered with FDA. FDA knows where they are. Some of my clients have been inspected by FDA for their good manufacturing practices. FDA does their job. They evaluate the GMPs. They give them observations to correct, and they leave. They don't seize the Kratom. A lot of my clients right now market Kratom products, and they have perfect labels. The labels follow the requirements that are Chapter 21 of the Code of Federal Regulations. A properly labeled dietary supplement has all the information to inform a consumer about how to take it. If it requires the advice of a healthcare practitioner, it's on the label. Seek the advice of a healthcare practitioner before you take this product. If it's not intended for women that are pregnant or want to become pregnant or that are breastfeeding, that's on the label. Don't take it if you fall in that category. It's on the label for 18 years older and up. Individuals that market Kratom, that market any dietary supplement, have a responsibility to know the safety before they go to market. And that safety is based off those conditions of use. If your product is labeled for 18 and up, that's how you have to know it's safe. You have to know it's safe for 18 and up. If it excludes people on heart medication, if it excludes people with liver disease, if it excludes pregnant women, you don't have to know it's safe in them because you've just told them not to take your product. I wonder if some of the reason that there's an increase in awareness about Kratom and that there's more reports about Kratom is because products now are actually labeled as Kratom. There's a label out there to inform a consumer, a healthcare practitioner, a regulator, or a law enforcement officer exactly what they're dealing with. 10 years ago, Kratom was sold in baggies. It was sold in baggies with marker written on it. We've come a long way. In the last 5 years, like I said, they're registered food facilities. They're registered with the Federal Food and Drug Administration. They put out labels and products that comply with federal requirements. And in the state of Georgia, products comply with your requirements. They comply with your KCPA. They're kept behind the counter. Children don't have access to them. They're responsible to make sure the person buying them is over 21. So you've already done a lot to regulate Kratom. One of the earlier witnesses said they suggest don't ban it, regulate it. In my experience, when you ban something, you create an underground market. You create a black market. It's not going to stop it from coming down Interstate 95 into your state. It's not going to stop people from buying it online. What it's going to do is it's going to make your KCPA irrelevant, and people are going to stop following it. It's going to limit your jurisdiction to take action on it when it's in the state. You should regulate it, not ban it. I think you have an enforcement problem. I think you have a data problem. Everything's Kratom. Everything's not Kratom. There's Kratom leaf, there's Kratom extracts, and then there are these horrible synthetics, 7-OH. A lot of what I heard earlier being described about addiction and adverse events really seems like it's attributable to 7-OH. We heard one witness when you said, what actually caused the deaths? And he said, I don't know, I'd have to go back and read the cases. Think about that. They're using data, but yet they have to go back and look at the case reports before they can tell you what that data really means. I think you have an enforcement problem. I think you have a data problem. I'm a former regulator. I'm a practicing attorney. I understand the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act pretty well when it comes to this. I'm happy to answer any questions or provide any context I can to the committee.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Two questions for me, then we'll have extra questions, I'm sure. Customs, I know where I read recently where if it's they will at times seize or burn the shipments from Kratom.
Thank you.
It's
Sir,
got to be
I'm
labeled.
very sorry, Chairman.
At time, I read where if it's labeled as a for medical use or a food product, it can be banned, it can be seized by customs. Does that still hold true that you know of?
So there is an
We'll get
import-
more testimony. with
Yes, sir.
law enforcement.
There is an import alert for the import of Kratom.
Okay,
In the import alert at the border, FDA has a lot of authority, more authority than they have domestically. Domestically, if they want to seize a product, they have to have evidence that it's adulterated. They have to have evidence that it violates the act. At the border, it's an appearance standard. It appears like it violates the act. So FDA has an import alert 5415, which allows them to pull over, detain Kratom. They send the responsible party a letter, a notice of action that says, hey, I have your Kratom. Why do you think it's legal? Now, I don't do imports. It's not what I do, sir. And what I'm told is that folks provide to Customs and Border Patrol, to FDA, proof that Kratom is an old dietary ingredient or proof that Kratom is under a new dietary ingredient notification, which I can say there are at least 9. There are at least 9 NDINs that have been sent to FDA with the basis for safety of Kratom. And I'm told, I've never experienced it, that when FDA receives this information, they release the shipment.
okay. Thank you. And 17, Chairman Corbett.
Thank you, Mr. Durkin. We talked about the phantom shoppers that was going around buying this stuff off the shelf, and then they were testing it at much higher percentage of the 7-OH than what was. Any states that have put guardrails on the 7-OH, the synthetic Kratom, who inspects it, who enforces it, and what are the penalties if somebody violates that? Can you?
Sure. So, I mean, there's authority at the federal level for 7-hydroxy. FDA has taken a strong stance. As a matter of fact, the witness on addiction that pulled up his phone, and he was correct. The Secretary of Health, Kennedy, the then Commissioner of the FDA, McCary, and an administrator from DEA stood on the stage, and they said they were going to stop the next wave of the opioid epidemic, sir. They were talking about 7-hydroxymetragynine. They were not talking about Kratom. During that same press conference, they actually said, we're not worried about natural leaf Kratom. We're worried about 7-hydroxy. So there's authority at the federal level, and there's authority at the state level. For example, the state of Missouri just reached a consent decree with one of the largest manufacturers of 7-OH to prevent him from manufacturing and selling 7-OH within his state, his home state. So Georgia has authority to go after 7-OH if they decide to. They did that under their Consumer Protection Act, their advertising laws. They went after them and said, you're marketing this stuff as a drug and it's not a drug. And he signed a consent decree and said he stopped doing it. If Missouri has a Consumer Protection Act, they could probably Georgia has a Consumer Protection Act. Y'all could probably do the same thing.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Representative Kendrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just a lawyer too, so I'm going to ask a question. So we have, or there's been testimony about a lot of medical reports, and I'm not going to pretend to know that to understand it all. Are there counter reports that the association has that can maybe give perspective to the various reports that are out there?
Yes, ma'am, there are, I believe. And I do have firsthand experience of reading some of these reports. And look, it sucks. Somebody's hurt, somebody's dead. Nobody wins. This is a horrible situation, and it's a tough thing to do. So condolences. I can only empathize. I can't, it was said, it seems like it's always polypharmacy. It seems like there's always something else on board. An illegal drug, another substance, medications, prescription medications that might have interacted with the Kratom article, whether it was, I don't think it's often Kratom leaf. I think it's usually an extract or 7-OH. But yeah, there are folks that are skilled in this that have gone in and looked at those reports and determined that, a lot of them are really polypharmacy. I think the Tampa Bay Times looked at 500 or 600, and a very esteemed professor, a very esteemed researcher, Marilyn Eustis, reviewed those reports. And I can't be held to the exact numbers, but I think out of that whole number, she determined just 6 or 9 might have been attributable to Kratom alone. So there's always confounding factors. I know FDA in one, when I was there, and it's public now, so I can say it, a person had Kratom in their system, confronted the police shot this person, killed this person, but the cause of death was Kratom. in the report. So I mean, there are some really weird things that happen with some of those reports, but look, I mean, I think it's terrible that people's autopsy reports have become something that we have to talk about in the situation. It's very complicated, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Okay, appreciate you being here. Thank you for your testimony. Next is Dr. Andrew Kolodny, Medical Director, Opioid Policy Research from, I believe, Brandeis University. If I pronounced that correctly.
Thank you. Can I grab this water?
Yes, please do. And we've got some extra waters on the side over here. Any of the speakers, welcome to one for sure. And we can't continue what you're doing. We sped it up. So let's keep that momentum going. And we're getting Representative Rees in just a minute. Just to let everybody know, there's quite a few people in this room, Dr. McCurdy and Dr. Kolodny and others who have traveled a long way to be here. So we appreciate you.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here today. I am an addiction medicine specialist, and I also research strategies for addressing the opioid crisis at Brandeis University, and I teach about the opioid crisis at Columbia University. I've been working on the opioid crisis for 20 years, assisting members of Congress, both Republicans and Democrats, assisting them in their investigations of the opioid industry and in their efforts to find legislative approaches to the opioid crisis. I've testified before the United States House and Senate. I've testified before the United Nations, for the World Health Organization, and I've assisted state attorney generals in their efforts to tackle the opioid crisis. I've worked as an expert witness in the litigation, including for the state of Georgia in the opioid litigation. I commend you all for forming this task force, Chairman Townsend. I think it's critical to review the science and to use that science to inform your policy making. I became especially engaged in the problem of kratom about a year ago. I had just returned to seeing patients again after not having seen patients for a few years, and I was just blown away by how all of the patients I was treating had become addicted using kratom. When I first started treating opioid addiction more than 20 years ago, all of the patients I was treating had developed their opioid addiction taking prescription opioids. And through my career, I also treated patients who had developed opioid addiction from heroin. But today, the patients that I'm treating, all of them who've become recently addicted in the past 5 or 6 years, it's kratom that caused their addiction. I've also been treating patients who were in remission from their addiction to heroin or prescription opioids and have relapsed using kratom. I wasn't sure if my experience was unique, so I got on the phone. I called colleagues from other parts of the United States, asked them, what are you seeing? These are colleagues who work in the field of addiction, and they all said the same thing. And if you were to attend the national meeting of the American Society of Addiction Medicine, you will hear that what all of the doctors there are talking about is the problem of kratom. And that is why I'm here today. And that's why I'm now working on this issue. In my presentation, I'm going to explain that kratom is not just a botanical substance with opioid-like effects. Kratom is an opioid, and I'll explain why that is true. I'm going to cover briefly lessons we should learn from the opioid crisis. People have wondered, is kratom helpful for the opioid crisis? Is it making it worse? I'll share with you my thoughts on that. And then lastly, I'm going to cover what the evidence tells us about states who've attempted to tackle this problem. A question was asked earlier about what's working in other states. We now have 2 recently published papers that have looked at what's happening across the country, and I'll share that with you as well. What is an opioid? An opioid is a drug that binds to the opiate receptor in the brain and activates the receptor. It's as simple as that. If the drug binds to the receptor and activates it and causes an opioid effect, that's an opioid. Now we have different types of opioids. We have opioids that occur naturally. For example, inside opium, we have molecules that exist there naturally, like codeine and morphine. Now, you can treat those molecules and create stronger, more potent versions. That's what you're doing when you create heroin or when you create oxycodone, hydromorphone, which is Dilaudid. You actually, to make all of those drugs, you start with opium, you treat them chemically, and you make drugs that absorb into the brain faster and are more potent. And another term for those opioids that you make out of the natural ones is semi-synthetic. We also have a third type of opioid, which is completely synthetic, where you need no natural substance to start. For example, fentanyl is completely synthetic. Tramadol, methadone, tapentadol, these are all opioids that you make completely out of chemicals. What all of these drugs have in common, they stimulate the brain's opioid receptor. They cause an opioid effect. The opium poppy is not the only place in nature where we find opioids. For example, this cute guy is the waxy monkey tree frog. And it's in the skin of the waxy monkey tree frog that we have an extremely potent opioid, more potent than morphine. Structurally, it's not even an alkaloid. It's a totally different type of molecule, but it activates the opioid receptor and it's an opioid. Kratom contains opioids. Mitragynine is an opioid, and there are other opioids in the kratom plant that exist there naturally. Now, if you were questioning whether or not kratom is really an opioid, is Dr. Kolodny just saying this? We have a textbook on the subject. One of the leading textbooks in the field of kratom, a pharmacology textbook. It's right there in the title, Kratom and Other Mitragynines, the Chemistry and Pharmacology of Opioids from a Non-Opium Source. This is the leading textbook on kratom. This is also a statement that the FDA has made perfectly clear. Several years ago, the FDA did a study to look at which receptors in the brain kratom molecules interact with, and then they made a press statement. They announced compounds in kratom make it so it isn't just a plant, it's an opioid. Once we understand that kratom is an opioid, much of what you've been hearing about, much of what we're experiencing nationally with kratom becomes a lot more clear. For example, doctors across the United States are treating patients addicted to kratom with the same medicine that we use for treating addiction to heroin or oxycodone or fentanyl. We are using buprenorphine, which is also called Suboxone. And doctors across the country are finding that they have no choice but to use Suboxone for treating kratom use disorder. Not every patient addicted to kratom is going to need Suboxone. I think there are some patients who can recover without it, but increasingly doctors are relying on Suboxone to treat this condition. Understanding that kratom is an opioid also helps explain why in neonatal intensive care units across the country, they're treating an increasing number of infants who are born opioid dependent because during pregnancy, their mothers used kratom. These are, now, if you're unfamiliar with neonatal abstinence syndrome, it's also called neonatal opioid withdrawal syndrome. These are infants who are born with excruciating discomfort. They have a very distinctive cry. They often require tapering treatment with opioids at the beginning of life. And often they wind up stuck in the hospital for weeks, sometimes even longer. I just spoke last week with a nurse in Des Moines, Iowa, who has treated now several patients, several infants for neonatal opioid withdrawal syndrome whose mothers had been using kratom. We heard earlier, we've heard mitragynine, I think both are fair to use. We've heard it described as a weak opioid, and that's true. But what does it mean when we talk about a weak opioid versus a strong opioid. I think we've heard 7-hydroxymetragynine referred to as a strong opioid. What that really means is if it's a weak opioid, you need to take more of it to achieve the same effect. A weak opioid is not necessarily safer. Certainly, a very strong opioid can be dangerous if it's fentanyl being mixed into something. If you put a little too much in, you can have an overdose very easily. But the fact that it's a weak opioid certainly does not make it less addictive. Opioids vary in different ways. Some opioids have a very long-acting effect, like methadone. Some opioids have a shorter effect, like fentanyl. They're different in different ways. But when we look at opioids, we really should understand that we have many different types that are, some are weak, some are strong, and that they all generally produce very similar effects. We've heard it mentioned today, I think Dr. Stack, who mentioned that when somebody consumes kratom, that the metragynine is converted in our body into 7-hydroxy. And we now understand that, or it seems increasingly clear, that the opioid effects that people experience when they take kratom is due to the conversion in our liver to 7-hydroxymetragynine. And this is important too. If you look at the top of the slide, I have the word human liver. Animal livers do this as well. Mice and rats, where most of the studies are being done, their livers also do this a little bit, but human livers appear to be much better at converting metragynine into 7-hydroxymetragynine, which means that some of the animal studies may be underestimating the risks, both the risk of respiratory depression and overdose death, and the risk of addiction. Our livers are especially good at making this conversion. And this is not unique for kratom. When somebody takes codeine, that's also an example of a drug where our liver converts it into a more potent opioid, morphine. So this is common with other types of opioids.
Dr. Chladni, I may have to speed you up, and
Okay.
if we have to bring you back again, we will, but if you can kind of.
Sure.
Thank you. I just scheduled a lot. I apologize.
Sure,
Thank
sure. So why do people take opioids? People take opioids because when you take an opioid, it produces very positive effects. There's a sense of well-being. People feel good when they take an opioid. It can relieve pain. It certainly relieves anxiety. And this is the reason why people take opioids. And these are all very positive effects. And you may wonder, why don't we all take opioids more often if they feel so great when you take them? It's because opioids have the problem of tolerance, dependence, and addiction. When you take an opioid every day, very quickly, you develop tolerance, meaning you'll need higher and higher doses to get the same effect. And as the doses get higher, it becomes more dangerous. When you take opioids every day, you rapidly develop dependence, meaning you'll feel sick when you try and stop taking them. As you heard earlier, the withdrawal from opioids from kratom is no different than the withdrawal from heroin and other opioids. And of course, opioids are highly addictive. An addiction is a life-threatening, life-altering condition that can happen easily if you're taking a highly addictive drug on a daily basis. The effects when you go into opioid withdrawal are essentially the opposite of the effects that you feel when you take an opioid, including a sense of impending doom. And it's important to understand that we think about when people get dope sick, is what's going to happen if, say, they go a day without taking an opioid and they get very sick. But it's important to understand that the withdrawal effects happen on a continuum. When someone who's a kratom user wakes up in the morning, they're already in a little bit of withdrawal. And when they take their morning kratom, they're going to feel much better. And that's certainly going to reinforce the notion that kratom is helping them. But when in reality, what the kratom is doing is relieving the withdrawal effects of the previous dose wearing off. Opioids are highly addictive, as I mentioned. I want to just quickly begin to wrap up by talking about the opioid crisis. And, these are different headlines that have appeared in newspapers to describe the opioid crisis. These are the different health and social problems, record high overdose deaths, babies born opioid dependent, fentanyl flooding into non-urban areas. How should we really understand the opioid crisis? We should understand it as an epidemic of opioid addiction. That's what's fueling the problem. And you can see the epidemic happening over time. This is people across the country seeking treatment for addiction to prescription opioids. The states with the highest rate are red or maroon. You can see what happened over time. We saw this dramatic increase in people addicted to prescription opioids seeking treatment. This is an epidemic of opioid use disorder. This is really what the opioid crisis is. And what caused the North American opioid crisis? Why did the United States wind up with an epidemic of opioid addiction? The answer to that question is on this slide, and it's very relevant to our discussion today. On this slide, the green line represents consumption in the United States of prescription opioids. And you could see the soaring increase in people consuming prescription opioids. And you see, along with that increase, a parallel increase in rates of addiction and overdose deaths. What fueled this problem was too many prescription opioids. I believe that this is exactly what's happening with kratom today. As kratom consumption has increased in the United States, people are getting addicted to kratom in greater numbers, and the deaths are going up rapidly. And just something that has to be cleared up. Earlier today, the number of deaths from kratom was mentioned as 233. That is incorrect. That number comes not from the CDC, but it comes from a paper published by the CDC on calls to poison control centers that involved a death. The CDC has data telling us that from 2020 to 2024, 5,200 Americans have suffered kratom-involved overdose deaths. 5,200, not 233. I want you to understand that not only is, I believe this is what's happening with kratom today, but I want you to know that the kratom industry is doing exactly what the prescription opioid industry did. As these lines were going up, the prescription opioid industry, Purdue Pharma, the maker of OxyContin, they were paying scientists, doctors, former FDA officials to try and confuse this situation, to try and sow doubt. And they were also disseminating a message, the opioid manufacturers, that all of the harms that we're hearing about, those are the addicts abusing these substances. That's the irresponsible user. The kratom industry is making the same argument that kratom is not addictive, that it's a safe substance, that the people getting into trouble were already addicts. That is false, and that is not what I'm seeing in my practice, and it's not what other doctors are seeing. I want to just quickly skip here to my last couple of slides. It was asked earlier, what's happening in other states? And so we now have two studies that were recently published. Different researchers really came up with very similar ways of looking at this problem, because we have sort of a natural experiment in the United States. We have some states that have completely unregulated kratom. We have some states like Georgia with regulated kratom and KCPA style regulations. And we have states that have complete bans. And what these researchers did was to compare these different states. The first paper looked at hospitalizations and severe events in these different states. And what they found was that in states that were regulating kratom, they were doing no better than states with completely unregulated kratom, that only the states with a ban on kratom had substantially fewer severe events involving kratom. That was the first paper. The second paper did pretty much the exact same thing, but they looked at the deaths. Those 5,200 deaths that I just mentioned from 2020 to 2024, and they found the exact same thing, that the states that had attempted to regulate kratom were doing no better than the unregulated states. Only states with bans had substantially fewer deaths. talked a little bit about this earlier. The FDA is to this day making it clear that their concern is not just 7-hydroxymetragenine, that their concern is also regular kratom products. And this is on their website right now. They're warning people not to use kratom. So I am going to conclude here. Kratom contains opioids. The opioid crisis teaches us that as you overexpose the population to opioids, as you make opioids more easily available, millions will get addicted. And the evidence tells us that the approaches that are working in other states are bans. And just one final point, people have wondered, could banning kratom make the fentanyl problem worse? That was discussed earlier this morning. We now have evidence to answer that question as well. We have states that have banned kratom, and we're not seeing an increase in fentanyl deaths. In fact, the state in the country which has had the most dramatic drop in fentanyl deaths is a state with a ban on kratom. That's the state of Vermont, and we're seeing similar effects in other states.
Thank you. No, thank you. Thank you very much. And right now, we don't have any questions, but feel free to send us more materials and very enlightening about the recent research. Thank you. And one of the things we're trying to do, our goal is to connect these researchers, guys, get everybody together, regardless of where they're at, because they're all across different levels of research they're at, and connect everybody. And next, I'm going to I'm going to go off script, go to Representative Reeves. Reeves, we'll have to make it quick if you can. Appreciate you being here. And then the other speakers, everybody else will have a little bit longer than Matt, Representative Reeves, but we'll kind of speed up because we have a hard stop at 12.
Thank you, Chairman Townsend and members of the committee. Really appreciate you spearheading this issue several years ago, and proud of what Georgia's done so far, and just wanted to come down here because some constituents heard you were doing follow-up and care about this issue of public safety. I've got a lot of high school students in my area, 4 big high schools, and a lot of young people, and Gwinnett County has a vibrant addiction recovery community with nonprofits, and people really care about this. It is definitely on their mind. I did some secret shopping, so I'll leave you with liquid, pill, and powder that's still available. It was behind the counter, behind the glass. They did check ID, so they are enforcing the age, but there's a large quantity and large variety of quote unquote kratom products. And you've heard some speakers who've raised questions about what exactly is that. So I'm going to leave you with that and look at it. Three of them are from California. One's from Idaho. One's from Oklahoma. Some of them have ingredients on the product. Some of them have some question marks, but I'll let you firsthand take a look at it to do your deep dive. Also, I'm presenting you with laws from Virginia, Arizona, Florida, and Texas about their kratom laws. I know the information you got today was a lot more detailed than we had 3 or 4 years ago. And certainly some of these other states have looked at it in depth, and some of their definitions and specificity, it's at a deeper depth than we had at our availability 3 and 4 years ago. So I'll leave you with that. A couple of models, the opioid model, that's been mentioned a few times today. There's transparency and civil liability on opioid. And I saw Georgia Southern get a big check from DBHDD from that opioid trust fund. So there are funds available from the industry to help people and to innovate and make sure that products are safe. And so I think that is a model to study about transparency, civil liability, and then compensation for people who were hurt or addicted. Also, advertising, the ingredients, the type and the quality, and also the Florida model. They have a minimum standard statewide, but Sarasota was allowed to enact a more restrictive set of regulations. And Georgia has 535 cities, 159 counties. So in addition to having our state minimum, have an explicit authorization for the locals to have more restrictive guidelines like we do for a lot of other industries, both on advertising as well as the actual products. Places with a lot of schools, a lot of children, a lot of people with addiction problems or other needs, and also advertising, you know, just the having a big "Get Your Kratom Here" sign where you got school buses passing by and high traffic counts. There are other industries that you have local zoning regulations that can address things like that. So I don't want to take up any time, but I did want to pass on the information. I've gotten a letter to you by email, and I think the staff may have sent it out, and then I'll start it with Chairman Smith, but just, we got powder, we've got pills, and we've got, the two different types of liquid that were available. And, they were available in unlimited quantities. So that's the status quo. Thank you.
Thanks, Representative. Appreciate you doing that. And one of the things I've done too, and it's the processes and the works where we do find something where we can do that secret shopping and it is over the limits, they don't go by the law. Report them to the sheriff, chief of police, whatever you have in municipality. And, we need to go after the bad guys. Leave alone the good actors, but go after the bad guys.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Representative Reese. Good job. Okay. Next will be Dr. Crandall. Kudos, Dr. Crandall, recent PhD graduate from Emory. Appreciate you being here. And I'm going to reinforce quick as you can, but it's an honor for you to be here. Congratulations. It was just a few weeks ago, wasn't it? You got your PhD?
In March.
March.
Yeah, thank you.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak at this hearing committee today. My name is Dr. William Crandall. I'm an analytical chemist and a pharmacologist. My NIH-funded research at Emory University has focused on understanding the polypharmacology as well as the drug metabolism of kratom and its various alkaloids in both a preclinical and clinical setting. We've heard a lot about kratom, and I need to speed up, so I'm going to skip some stuff here, but I want to begin by reiterating this clear definitional distinction, and that is kratom refers to the raw leaf and the natural ratios of alkaloids found within, not all of these other products that we've already heard a lot about on the market. To further note, I think I saw this on some slides, but kratom is specifically the genus and species Mitragynous speciosa. So this is very important because this genus contains over 10 different species. Kratom has centuries of ethnobotanical use, with the first documentation of the plant in Western culture by Dutch botanist Peter Wilhelm Corthals in 1839, and it has a variety of uses in traditional context, such as the treatment of diarrhea, fever, pain, and to boost energy. Traditional preparations include mastication and buccal absorption, that's the chewing of the leaves and packing in between the cheek and the gum, as well as brewing the leaves in water and drinking the decoction. So this differs quite markedly from the preparations and what you see on the market today in the United States. Important to the pharmacology of kratom, this was touched on, is the conversion of mitragynine to 7-hydroxy. This occurs in your liver upon oral consumption, and we have human data on this. This occurs slowly over time, and around 15 to 20% of the mitragynine dose present in kratom is converted to 7-hydroxy. What's really important about this is that the conversion takes place over time, and therefore the peak plasma concentrations never achieve levels that you could obtain from taking a synthetic, semi-synthetic product like a 7-hydroxy tab. Importantly, 7-hydroxy mitragynine shows severe respiratory depression in humans, unlike mitragynine and the kratom leaf material. And Hill et al. In the British Journal of Pharmacology have shown mitragynine to have a ceiling effect. So these effects are due to the rate-limiting conversion of mitragynine to 7-hydroxy in the liver. As you know, there are various types of kratom-related products on the market, products which are concentrated extracts containing unnaturally high abundances of mitragynine liquid shots. Sometimes these are combined with other plants like kava, even THC. And lastly, multiple semi-synthetic products such as 7-hydroxy and pseudoindoxyl. And to be very clear, pseudoindoxyl is not found in kratom at all. 7-hydroxy is found only in trace levels, and many studies have found that it is not present in some of their products that they have tested. In fact, that blue bottle you see there contains kava in that kratom shot there. I've analyzed that, by the way. I've done some secret shopping myself, and treating kratom as the same as these various types of other products is incorrect on both an analytical chemistry and pharmacological standpoint, not just a legislative. So multiple human clinical trials have been conducted using well-characterized kratom leaf, As we heard from McCurdy, the FDA funded a single-dose escalation study on kratom published in the Journal of Clinical Psychopharmacology in 2026, and it concludes, I quote, "In summary, the current study, orally administered botanical kratom, was well tolerated with the most commonly reported adverse events observed at the highest doses, e.g. 8 to 12 grams, and classified as mild in severity, that's i.e. grade 2 or lower," end quote. A second human study conducted by Hustis et al. Published in Journal of Therapeutic Drug Monitoring in 2026, in which a single dose and multiple doses of ground kratom leaf given over a period of 15 days concludes, I quote, "This novel single and multiple dose randomized placebo-controlled double-blind study shows that M. speciosa derived mitral leaf kratom powder was safe and well tolerated at the dose ranges tested, with no evidence of meaningful abuse potential or withdrawal," end quote. Lastly, a study in which humans were given purified mitragynine up to 40 milligram doses, so that's the main alkaloid found in the leaf, by Privet et al., published in Journal of Psychopharmacology, Berlin in 2024, denotes the following results. I quote, "Mitragynine did not significantly affect vital signs and only mild transient side effects were reported," end quote. Kratom has legitimate medicinal potential, as McCurdy noted. Actually, just on June 1st, the NIH announced their IND application with the FDA has taken effect to assess mitragynine as a potential treatment for opioid use disorder. So while there is some potential for mild to moderate addiction, again, McCurdy presented on that with a relatively low SALS or subjective opioid withdrawal scale compared to other opioids, more studies in this regard are needed. The products in the trials that I just mentioned were well defined. You know the amount of mitragynine and the total alkaloidal content, which is very important because kratom is not just mitragynine. It's 54 different known alkaloids to date. And that's very different from what we see on the market, which is flooded with these adulterated, mislabeled, uncharacterized, and concentrated extracts, and specifically these semi-synthetic products, which are entirely different than the kratom leaf. As an analytical chemist, it's quite easy to distinguish these semi-synthetic products from the leaf material itself. And I would like to conclude that what would protect kratom consumers the most would not be legislation, but rather regulation of kratom products on the market. Products which follow good manufacturing procedures, quantify these alkaloidal compositions, do not have these extremely concentrated semi-synthetic products, and are not branded or labeled to minors or children. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Crandall. Any questions? I know you and I talked on the phone, and I think I asked you the question about where we should sell it at. If we don't ban it, do we let it stay in the vape shops and convenience stores, or is it safer with the professional?
You know, it was mentioned before, but where something is sold plays a lot on the kind of psychology of what you're buying. So, you know, if you're buying something in a gas station, as I've done many times to analyze this in the lab using techniques like mass spec, you know, that might not be the best option. So, you know, in Georgia, we have the KPCA, which, as the previous presenter showed, was ineffective. I think it's not enforced. I can go into a gas station right now and buy pseudoindoxil. I can measure it on my instrument, and it actually contains 7-hydroxymitragynine levels higher than what the KPCA allows.
Okay.
So selling in a place in which that can be controlled might be best for public health.
Thank you. Okay, next will be Dr. Norton, University of Georgia Pharmacy School. Dr. Emeritus Professor, I believe. He's appreciate his current input and past input. And again, I apologize. We did check it yesterday and called early this morning, and it still hasn't helped. So I apologize.
I just want to clarify a couple of things. I'm not getting paid by anyone to be here. I just want to let y'all know that. My background is that I'm a clinician. I've been a practicing pharmacist in the state of Georgia for over 50 years in multiple settings. went back to school, got a new doctorate specific to the University of Georgia to do the research, which I'm really, really excited about the researchers that have been presented so far today, having to do with addiction science. Retired in 2021 because my wife developed late stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma she was at the stage of death. Fortunately, because of miracle of science and because of medicine, she's in complete remission as of today. And she's taking care of the dog. That's why I'm here. I have a dog that loves me and hates her, but she decided it was important for me to be here. So not to take up your time, I'm not going to regurgitate the things that, these marvelous speakers have presented, both in a good way and given me a lot of thoughts. I've taken a lot of notes. But my question and my concern was, this was a Blue Ribbon Study Committee on Youth Exposure to Kratom. So what I wanted to do is, and I haven't heard a lot about what happens to the adolescent brain when Kratom is used. As most of the researchers have indicated, if it be a regulated state or unregulated state, these kids are able to find the products, and we don't know what's in them. I, as a pharmacist, and I have several of the pharmacists here, will reiterate, I don't know what's in the product. You're going to ask me, Merrill, would you recommend Kratom to one of your patients? And the answer is that no. My best advice to them is buyer beware, because I have no clue. Being a pharmacist, there are things that I got to know dosing, and we have multiple ways to consider the dosing, whatever we're going to do in the research. Which molecule are we going to dose? Because we got more than one molecule, and that's been clarified very much today. What's the tolerance curve? What's the genomics? How does your genetics affect the effect? I know with opioid substance use disorders, there are people who are wired to be opiate use disordered individuals. They can take high amounts of an opioid and do very well, very similar to genetic alcoholics. But we don't know that, y'all. We don't know that. And then the adverse drug effects. All right. Because my time is short, and I wanted to, and it's hot. Let's talk about the adolescent brain a minute. The adolescent brain is the brain that transitions from a childhood brain to an adult brain. Adolescence is the culmination of taking a child, a predominantly electrical, somewhat chemical brain, and converting it into adult brain, which is somewhat electrical and chemical, and it functions. That adolescent world is about 11 to 12 years old. It takes that time. So what happens is they're more vulnerable to substance use disorders. It takes less than 2 years for an average of an individual under the age of 15 using a psychoactive substance to develop a substance use disorder. Unfortunately, we don't have effective treatments for them because we don't have a lot of adolescent treatment facilities in the state of Georgia to deal with substance use disorder. It's another issue for another day, but I'm going to tell you, when you talk about something that we're talking about here that has the potential to impact an adolescent brain, then the first thing I'm going to tell you, you don't need to have it anywhere close to anybody until the science says, this is how you take it, this is what you do with it, this is what we're going to do with it. And without that complete review that's approved not only from the state, but also the FDA and all of us. Now, adolescents are unique in that their brains develop differently. As y'all have had adolescents, I've got 2 of my adult children in the audience, thank goodness. They got through adolescence without a whole lot of trouble, a lot of money, but no trouble. But the thing about it is their prefrontal cortex, the limbic reward system, the hippocampus, the stress circuitry, the myelinated executive control networks. Now, let me tell you something about that. My studies having to do with psychoactive substances has to do with neuroinflammation. Neuroinflammation is the impact of a drug passing the blood-brain barrier into the neocortex and inflaming that part of the brain. And that's where we see psychoactive drugs being so. So if y'all want to research out here, y'all also include your neuroinflammation as you look at that. Because the thing about it is the adolescent brain is vulnerable. And what happens to the blood-brain barrier is when these molecules begin to hit this blood-brain barrier, as with some substances, guess what? It creates holes in the dam. And when them holes in that blood-brain barrier has certain molecules get passed through. So we may have, as we say, the mitragynine, it may pass through, and maybe the 7-OH may not, but as a result of impact to those, it could. So the thing is, we have that impact, and that affects their executive control. The reward system sensitization changes. In other words, the dopaminergic system, the serotonergic system, the systems that are histaminic systems. You know, we got a new histamine H3 receptor in the brain that's responsible for a lot of our dementias. Guess what this drug is going to do? I'll guarantee you the researchers will find it will impact that brain at a young age, and they can have early onset dementias down in their adulthood. And the problem that comes with that, y'all, is we really need to review these drugs thoroughly before we pass anything that says they're legal. As many of them said, I've done some of that secret shopping, and I've had some issues. I have calls from all kinds of folks in my small practice because I'm mainly an educator now. I try to retire today. I could have been on the golf course today, but here I am. But thank y'all for your committee work. I really am. I salute you for that. So what we see is when you change that hippocampal component in the brain, you change their learning component. Now, you can talk to the Department of Education right now. You can talk to them and talk about the dropouts that we're having in the state of Georgia and the reason that we're having so decline in our math and reading. You know, when I unfortunately taught at the University of Georgia, you would find some of the finest students available. But how many students don't make it to that extent? And is it drug, you know, is it this particular drug? You have mood, anxiety, and stress disorders, which are even more significant. And once they start, y'all, we can't stop them. And then, of course, the risk of dependence and withdrawal. And I think several of the speakers have indicated is kratom, and I know it's got multiple molecules. Is it an opioid, or if it's not, yes, it is. It's, you know, kratom itself, and in fact, I've read one of the researchers, some of their data on, I think it's the University of Florida, said it's like a codeine effect, which is a mild opioid, but yet it can affect it. So what I'd want y'all to know is that adolescents, when they take a concentrated 7-OH, according to this researcher, it can create an opioid-like intoxication. It creates sedation that leads to accidents, severe impaired driving, respiratory risk. If they combine it with alcohol, marijuana, other drugs, there's not just a single drug on board as a rule, rapid tolerance, severe withdrawal, compulsive use. And the thing that I will say about this particular compound, it is the gateway drug to other opioids that are now available. Do y'all realize I've got to do a talk in Norcross tomorrow, and then I've got to do a talk in Forsyth. Tomorrow it's prescription misuse to a group up there. And then in Forsyth County, I've got to go talk to the drug court folks about psychotropics and the medications can be used to help put those people back together. I cannot tell you how important it is to do your work and do it thoroughly, y'all. Like I say, I come voluntarily. I do what I do most of the time, help families get treatment, help them understand why I've had 59 suicides on my watch in my career, y'all. Multiple drugs, you understand. It saddens me. It saddens me to see the 17-year-old down the street who is hopefully, and his mother's a great neighbor, call me and talk to me about, well, he's using this little bottle of stuff and he says it's kratom, and what can I do? What can I do? And many of y'all had those same calls. We need to stop it. And the only way you stop it is you ban it until science comes up with an alternative. Now, I will say this, harm reduction, I'm a big harm reduction person. If there's individuals who are in opioid withdrawal and they would like to have a kratom-like product, we have clinics that could be set up for that. MOU clinics, they're medically supervised. It would be the safe thing to do. And I'll be the last one to tell you, if you want to get your prescription drugs filled, you're going to take them to a gas station to get them filled? Because I'm telling you, a lot of these gas stations turn into be big corporates, and they're nice things, but they have very, very sophisticated ways of selling things. But then look at the bathrooms. You know, you go to some of these places and you wouldn't think about using their bathroom, but yet they sell these products. Do they know those products? The answer to that is no. So I come here kind of as an advocate to protect the youth, our next generation of Georgians, because that's why when I retired from the University of Georgia, I was in treatment for a very long time, and treatment works, but a lot of people don't make it. I went to prevention, and that's where I spend my time now, is in prevention. I'm so thrilled to everyone who presented today and who's been here. I've got a tremendous education, and this information that they've given me and these studies and that information that I requested from you is to educate physicians and practitioners and all of those that I travel the country doing all the time. So thank you very much. I know I didn't provide you any specific statistics. I don't like a lot of statistics because they change every day. So I conclude my remarks. Any questions you may have?
Thank you, Dr. Norton. I appreciate it. I don't think so, and we'll connect again for sure. Thank you for making the time. We're making a slight switch. We have time for 2 more speakers, so we're in good shape. Hard stop at 12 o'clock. Michael, he's online. We're going to let Eli go. He's got to run. I'm going to let Eli Cohen go for a few minutes. Then after that, we'll have Michael Templeton right after that. So we will have them both be on there. And again, it's a hard stop at 12.
I'm going to be the only one bringing samples for you guys.
You have to speak in the microphone. Has 2 roles. His role today mainly is going to be as a post-certified trainer for law enforcement for gas station drugs. He is also a trial attorney for the Weatherton law firm. He is currently doing post-certified training. And we will be, on a side note, studying other things. I know vaping is going to be one thing we're taking up since it's affecting adolescents, and there probably 1 or 2 other drugs as well within this committee. Mr. Cohen.
Mr. Townsend, thank you to the committee. Like you heard, my name's Eli Cohen. I'm an attorney at the Weatherington Law Firm. And let's make sure everyone understands, I represent families of loved ones who have died. I have about 15 of these cases across the country. The majority of them are here in Georgia. All these families were taking some kind of kratom, either extracts or raw kratom. I don't currently have any 7-OH cases, but we are starting to see those phone calls come in. My background is, before I was an attorney, I was a police officer here in Georgia for 12 years. I started just down the street at Georgia State University because somebody told me that the legislature created a system where if you're a full-time employee, you get free school. And that's how I paid for undergrad. And then I did 8 years in Sandy Springs, where I worked on all kinds of units, with my last 3 years being on the SWAT team. And that was a lot of fun. And then again, because I just like people telling me what to wear, I'm also been in the Army Reserves for the last 15 years, currently a major and an intelligence officer with a top secret clearance. I'm here to tell you kind of the landscape of Georgia, and kind of talk about like what has Georgia already done and what have we seen since that happened. As you guys know, there was an amendment to the previous Kratom Consumer Protection Act in 2024 that did several things, right? It raised the age to 21. It limited the amount of mitragynine that can be in a product to 150 milligrams. It also limited the amount of 7-OH that can be in a product per serving to 1 milligram. That already exists in Georgia for 7-OH. And it also prevents synthetics, things like pseudodoxil, from being in these products. And what you see getting passed around are products that a lot of people, I've gone and bought products. And then I've sent them actually to Dr. McCurdy down here because his lab tests them, which is what you see attached to those. And on several of those products that I am passing around, you're going to see 2 things. Some products you're going to see that are labeled as 7-hydroxymetragynine and have 30, 40, 50, 80 milligrams of 7-OH in them. That is already illegal in Georgia. But the issue is the enforcement is not happening because it's hard to enforce these products. The other thing you're going to see is you're going to see several companies started selling things as pseudodoxil because, hey, 7-OH is banned. Let me just sell it as pseudodoxil. And so I passed them around. I brought one up to show you because this is my favorite one. I'll let you read that for yourself if you can. This product that they're selling you, let everybody else see it. It is labeled as a pseudo-indoxil product, but as Dr. McCurdy tested, it actually has more than 9 milligrams of 7-OH in the product. That is what we're seeing on the shelves of Georgia in both smoke shops and in gas stations throughout the country. And that is just consistent. The same is true with some of the other kratom products that I'm passing around, the extracts and the just raw powders. These companies are not abiding by the regulations that you've already put in place. And why is that? Well, regulation is hard. It is hard for law enforcement to walk into every single one of these gas stations, buy the product, or know that the product is illegal by looking at the label. It is, law enforcement is not in the business of walking into a gas station, doing what I've done, buying a product, sending it to a lab, paying for the test, and then coming back with the results in order to write a warrant. It's just not something that gets done. The regulation is really hard, which is why I think what you've heard here today is that where you can buy it is so important. Removing these from especially gas stations and probably smoke shops is smart. We already have a system of well-regulated sellers of some of these kinds of drugs. Your low THC oil laws already have these things. You heard of the dispensaries. That could be a place where Kratom could go to get it out of these companies, these gas stations and smoke shops that don't seem to care about the laws that you've passed. So there's something that I would strongly encourage you to think about as we move forward. The other thing I want the committee to think about is what should even be on the market here in Georgia. I'm going to throw this out here now because I think at some point the Kratom advocates that are in the front row and throughout are going to get to talk. I don't think the extract should be sold at all, period, full stop. And I'd love to hear their thoughts on that as well. The majority of my cases involve extracts. Why? Because the Kratom powder per gram may have 10, 12 milligrams of metragynine in it, as opposed to some of the products you see getting passed around. Some bottles will have 300 milligrams of metragynine in a single 5, 10 ounce bottle. It is absolutely insane the amount of metragynine that you can shove into your body with the products that are on the market. And there's just no reason. There are no human studies that have gone the distance that is tested using Kratom, raw or extract, over a long period of time. You've heard about a single ascending dose where these individuals, many of whom were not opiate naive, or at least had used some opiates in the past, but were otherwise healthy, were in these studies. That is exactly the kind of study that should happen, that first level study, but it's not, no drug would be sold off of a single ascending dose, off of a single dose study. And we are not at a point where we can say any of these products are safe, but at the very least, as a compromise to save some of these citizens, you should seriously consider banning extracts. Other things I want to mention.
Yeah, real quick too, don't forget, talk a little about the post-certified training, and
Yep.
we do have one more speaker.
So one of the things I've done because of the gap in the knowledge of law enforcement is I created a class for police officers in Georgia. While I was a police officer, I got certified as both a field training officer and a certified general instructor. I think the term is now I'm a senior instructor under post rules. And so I created a 2-hour course of instruction for post-certified police officers to receive credit. And we cover kind of 2 broad areas. Number one, we cover Kratom. Because I want to empower the officers to be able to look at a label and immediately know if that label is valid or not. Because if a store is selling illegal label, that's a misdemeanor. That is something they can go after immediately, and it doesn't require testing the product. But that takes a while to teach and pass along those classes. The other thing we cover are other gas station drugs, mostly focused on THC, Delta-8, Delta-9, and low THC oil products, because again, those laws are still relatively new, and helping officers understand what's legal, because the same is true for Kratom as it is for the THC products. And I have some in my magic bag if you want to see it later. The same places that are selling these Kratom products that are not properly labeled and are often mislabeled and adulterated with stuff with higher levels of 7-OH that they're allowed to have, or sometimes lying about what's actually in the product, are doing the same thing with low THC, with Delta-8 or Delta-9 products and hemp products, which is, again, it's just evidence that these businesses, unfortunately, aren't doing the right things for Georgians and maybe shouldn't be trusted. There's a reason why we don't sell low THC oil in gas stations, and that might be true for a lot more products than just low THC oils. So I know we're running out of time, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I do want to open up for questions if I could.
Sure, thank you, Eli. Dr. Al, Representative Al.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to draw attention to 2 of these exhibits that you brought, because it's actually pretty interesting if we're talking about approach to labeling and regulating that. This first one, called Hush Kratom Energy Drink, I noticed that in terms of the active ingredients that it lists for for total mitragynine content about 65 milligrams, which is above the threshold for sedation, as one of our earlier pharmacology experts testified. But it also contains 80 milligrams of caffeine, which is the same amount as in a Red Bull. I just held them up to each other to check. Just to note that there's a phenomenon of a beverage that was banned, actually, Four Loko, we remember from 2010, was banned because it contained both alcohol, which is a depressant, and a high content of caffeine, and it made it dangerous because the caffeine masked the effects of the depressant. So that's something we may want to consider in terms of concurrent active substances packaged with something that is a depressant and may affect your sensorium and mental status. So that's the one thing. The second thing is this tablet here.
The dopium.
You know what I'm going to say, right? This is an extract that we talked about, the 7-hydroxy extract, which is not the pure leaf kratom we talked about. It is 80 milligrams, which is, again, above the depressant threshold for dosage. And just in terms of the marketing, we can say it's marketed for this and that, and it's safe and all these things, but to explicitly label this supplement as dopium maybe gives away the game a little bit of what they're trying to appeal to and what message they're trying to send to people for this.
That's absolutely right. One of the products you have that the other representative brought in right in front of you, the Malay kratom bag, it's OPMS kratom. They used to just call themselves OPM kratom. They literally called themselves opium. But these companies are not hiding the ball. And in fact, OPMS kratom is one of the largest supporters of the American Kratom Association. But even they, and again, I am directly suing them in 5 states right now. And so these companies they're not hiding the ball on what they're selling. They're selling what they want consumers to know as opium.
Sure.
And again, they're not doing it the way you've already told them they need to. And the products that continue to hit the market, this is true both in kratom and other gas station drugs like Delta 8. There's a race to the top. I need to make the strongest product in order to sell my product. One of the things we've heard since 7OH has become a problem is that raw leaf and even extract manufacturers are saying, I'm losing so much business to 7OH. Like I'm gonna go out of business because of 7OH. If you are losing your business to a better drug, you're not actually providing that kind of that public health service. You're just a drug dealer, right? It's almost as if a cocaine dealer is complaining about crack, in my opinion. It's just not legitimate. So again, is there a place probably for some kind of use of kratom as a treatment in low dosage as a raw powder form? Maybe. But extracts and anything beyond that, 7OH and the synthetics, you should ban them.
Certainly, and then just to wrap it up, I've noticed a lot of the marketing does lean on this sort of like natural botanical leaf symbology as sort of, I guess, indicating that it's safe and natural as an alternative for whatever you're trying to treat. But just to remind people, just because it comes from a plant doesn't mean it's safe, because as we know, opium comes from a plant, cocaine comes from a plant, cannabis is from a plant, so just to put that out there.
Thank you, Representative Al. Thank you, Mr. Cohen.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go online now to Michael Templeton. He is DEA Special Agent, retired CEO of Barrister Intelligence. And this is the last witness of the meeting, and thank you for everybody for sticking with the hot air in here, or no air.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear. We're trying to get you on TV.
Okay, you let me know when I can go.
You're on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to speak today. I'm a retired special agent with the DEA. I spent 25 years with the DEA, both in domestic offices, small and mid-size, as well as overseas. I spent 2 years in Pakistan and 2.5 years in Afghanistan combating the world's leading producer of heroin, which is important to remember today, that we are talking about opioids and the stimulant effects of opioids versus opiates. And of course, heroin is an opiate, and I spent quite some time there combating the opiate excursion coming out of Afghanistan, along with the terrorist financing that went along with it. What I'd like to talk about first is where is the regulations in Indonesia. So we heard earlier that most of the kratom is produced in Indonesia. That is correct. About 95% comes from the island of Borneo. on the western side of Borneo and Indonesia. Current estimates are that they are exporting approximately 4,500 metric tons of kratom into the United States per month. To put that in perspective, the country of Afghanistan, the world's largest producer of heroin, produces 3,000 metric tons of heroin per year. So in 1 month, they're sending 4,500 metric tons of kratom powder to the United States. It is perfectly legal for them to export the kratom from Indonesia to the United States and other countries that will allow it. There's many countries in Europe and other places who have completely banned its importation. But it's important to note that the country of Indonesia's health minister prohibits any type of kratom products in food, beverages, vitamins, minerals in the country of Indonesia. And then their equivalent of their Drug Enforcement Administration is calling for kratom to be Schedule 1 in their own country. And this is the #1 exporter of kratom into the United States. So how does it get into the United States if it's banned? If we've heard this import alert issued by the Food and Drug Administration. So the import alert is basically an import alert from the FDA to U.S. Customs and Border Protection to seize on demand. If you see it, seize on demand. It's like a per se. You don't have to prove any intent. You seize it, and then they go into this whole regulatory thing. They can either the person who is importing can either pay to have it destroyed, or they can ship it back to the country of origin, and that's it. So why is all this getting into the United States? It gives the impression that there's this regulatory system set up by the U.S. Customs in coordination with the FDA that somehow or another every container worth of kratom that's coming in is inspected and improved. FDA's gone to these facilities and approved it. That's simply not the case. So the amount of containers coming into our ports in the United States, these are sea containers, are about 11 million containers per year. So the Customs and Border Protection only cracks open a 40-foot container based on intelligence, and that intelligence comes from CBP's National Targeting Center-Cargo, which sits in the DC area. So imagine a fusion center, if you will, kind of like your GBI fusion center. So they're getting intelligence from all over the world about containers coming to the United States, and they prioritize things that they're looking for, such as weapons of mass destruction, nuclear, biological, things that could hurt our crops, things that could spread an epidemic to our cattle industry. Illicit drugs, things that are scheduled by the DEA or U.S. Congress. And then down the list and further down the list would be an import alert. But even if something were flagged on this algorithm that they're using as kratom, there's not enough bandwidth to crack open every container. I've done it. I've done it in the Port of New Orleans. I've done it in the Port of Miami. I've assisted in cracking up containers at the Port of New York when we're dealing with various things, including drug paraphernalia going to convenience stores. So it takes a full day for a whole team to search one container. So we're talking about 11 million containers. You can see the immense problem of the enforcement of this import. So here's the important part. Every gram of kratom that's come into the United States and made it into the state of Georgia has come in through either luck or by fraud. But luck, because the sheer immense job that the CBP has to identify the particular containers, then have the bandwidth and manpower to search and seize these things. By fraud is these companies, which you've heard a lot about today, a couple of them by name, they will lie on their import documents that the product is something other than for human consumption. They will call it cat litter or some type of botanical fertilizer so that the algorithms don't pick up on it and so that it gets through customs. So in effect, every single importer into the United States has violated federal law, either whether they were being completely honest or whether they actually committed fraud. So the deceptive importer is looking at multiple federal statutes that they violated. Title 18 USC 545, importing merchandise contrary to law based on the evasion of these FDA alerts, carries a penalty of up to 20 years in federal prison. Making false statements to a federal agency, 5 years in federal prison. Entry of goods by means of false statements, 18 USC 542, up to 2 years in prison. Now let's talk about the truthful importer. Let's say an importer says, I'm importing kratom and it's for human consumption. I'm going to convert it, or I'm going to put it in little capsules and I'm going to sell it at gas stations all around the country. They were truthful, but yet it got through by luck because CBP was never flagged and they never searched their container, so it gets through. They still violated federal law. So there's a strict liability. It's a misdemeanor if it's 21 USC 331 and 333A1 under the Food and Drug Cosmetic Act. It's introducing an unimproved new dietary ingredient or unsafe food additive, and it carries up to 1 year in prison. You heard the lawyer for the AKA speak earlier that he is not an import specialist. Well, this is important to note that we are a nation of laws, and the state of Georgia is a nation of laws. And so every bit of kratom that you guys are talking about was imported into the United States illegally, and they're all facing, if the DOJ wanted to, jail time and significant civil penalties. That's not to mention the money laundering that goes into this. So for every dollar that was wired to Indonesia to pay for a container full of kratom, they committed money laundering. And there's other statutes that I won't talk about. There's probably at least 9. And this has happened before in the state of California. The U.S. Attorney's Office there actually prosecuted a man for entry of goods by means of false statements, and he was wiring money back and forth to Indonesia. So what they did is they got him with money laundering. It's also important to note that all 3 organizations that you will hear from, including the American Kratom Association, the Global Kratom Coalition, and a group called HEART, are all led by convicted felons. The AKA's main spokesperson, convicted felon. The Global Coalition, Kratom Coalition, spent nearly 9 years in federal prison, convicted felon. The HEART, it's HART, was a large-scale marijuana producer and FBI informant, convicted felon. That's important to note because whenever I testified in federal court and in state court, and you hear witnesses who take the stand, if they're a civilian, their criminal record comes into place to determine their credibility. So do your own research and understand who's going to be coming to talk to you. So about
Mr.
2 months
Tucker,
ago,
if you can, we're kind of on a tight timeline, and if we need to get you back during the law enforcement section, we can. Anything else you want to add regarding the DEA, what your involvement was, and kind of heads up for us?
yeah, let me finish this up with gas, the history of gas stations. So don't be on the wrong side of history on this, folks. I've been through it all since the early 90s when ephedra came into gas stations. It was called gas station speed. And then Spice come along, this synthetic cathinones where they sprayed it on an inert material. And then it was ultimately scheduled into Schedule 1. Then comes along bath salts. And then ultimately it was Scheduled 1. Now comes along kratom. So is it going to be Scheduled 1 in the future by U.S. Congress? I think so. So in conclusion, I would tell you this, that from the horse's mouth, I was contacted from Indonesia by an Indonesian supplier who offered me a 40-foot metric container containing 27 metric tons of kratom. This just last month for $5.50 per kilogram. And he told me that the kratom works exactly like the opiates on your brain and will get you high and help you study. You guys have talked a lot about youth today. well, this comes from the supplier in Indonesia that tells you these things. So listen to everything. I appreciate all of your time, and I welcome any questions that you have.
Committee, any questions? Okay, no questions at this time. We appreciate it. You're welcome to send us stuff, and such as other speakers as well. We'll be glad to distribute it to committee members. That won't be any problem at all. We will have minimally 3 more meetings regarding this. We will have public participation where one of them is going to be largely public participation, maybe a few other speakers. So we will make sure we hear from you as well. Today was definitely a fact-finding mission. I'm going to let everybody else start with Representative Mathis. Any closing comments? Okay, Chairman Corbett.
Thank you for holding the meeting. Very eye-opening.
Thank you. Dr. Al?
Thank you for organizing today since we have to be here.
Yes. And Representative Ridley.
Thank you for
Thank you.
Thank you for having me, and also, you know, our president has 34 felonies, so.
Thank you. And then I'm going to let you guys start off with Sarah. Y'all two introduce yourselves real quick. I failed to do that earlier.
Sarah Crittenden with the Office of Legislative Counsel. I helped draft the bills.
And I'm Patrick Mock with the House Budget and Research Office. I'll be the analyst for the study committee.
And if you, Deborah, if you can raise your hand, you see here through emails and things like that. So even the people who came here just to interested stuff, if you can't find me, if you can find Deborah, you're welcome to call our office. If you need our numbers or email before you leave, we'll give them to you. But Deborah's a rock star, and Elizabeth's in the office too is a rock star. We appreciate your help, and we'll make sure the error is working next time and where we'll be at for sure. Okay, thank you very much, and y'all have a great day.